Chapter 53 Ambush. Unlike devils, vampires lived in the human world, in the darkness of the human world. What this meant was a bit complicated. They still lived in the human world, but their world was basically like a second world existing parallel to the humans, isolated despite existing on the same plane. To reach the vampires' territory, Rias, Kiba, and Azazel had met up with Elmenhilda at the airport late at night and boarded a private jet owned by the Carmilla faction. The private jet was not as luxurious as one owned by the House of Gremory, but it was still impressive. A carpeted floor, numerous chairs to lounge on, and a professional bar decorated the interior. Of course, the bar was filled mostly with blood instead of wine. Rias fortunately didn't drink. Azazel did, however, and he had more than a few things to say about the lack of good booze. Rias spent most of her time speaking with Elmenhilda. She wanted to know the vampire girl a little better, and now was the perfect opportunity. Because her desire was to know more about Elmenhilda personally, she kept the conversation away from politics and anything involving the current squabble between the Carmilla and Tepes factions. Her goal was to get a feel for Elmenhilda as a person. The first thing she learned was that Elmenhilda was supremely arrogant, even more so than the most arrogant pureblood devils. She was 10 times worse than Riser Phoenix had been when he stormed into the human world and demanded her hand in marriage. "It is not that I do not acknowledge the strength of other races," Elmenhilda said when Rias came onto the topic of strength and power. "It is merely that all races pale in comparison to the nobility of vampires. Take you devils for instance. I will certainly not deny that you have incredible strength. But your strength comes at the cost of making you less perfect, less noble. You lack the refinement of a pureblood vampire. So, even if you are strong, it is a strength that comes from sullying yourself." Her beliefs were radical and her thoughts arrogant beyond measure. If Rias did not have experience dealing with arrogant people and the patience to put up with her boyfriend's antics, she might have been tempted to throw this child out the window. She guessed it was a good thing Naruto could act whimsical and stupid. "I am amazed you can say that when you're seeking our help," Azazel said as he sat in one of the lounge chairs. He looked relaxed with his posture slumped against the seat and his arms crossed. His smirk looked arrogant to others, but Rias already knew the man's personality and wasn't bothered. "HMPH. Did I not just say we can acknowledge the strength of others? You might be a filthy fallen, but your knowledge of sacred gears is still second to none. We noble vampires have acknowledged that," Elmenhilda said with crossed arms as she looked her nose down at Azazel. "Well, gee, I am pleased to know you think so highly of me," Azazel muttered. "I find your form of arrogance and discrimination toward other races quite odd," Rias confessed. "It's not arrogance and discrimination." Elmenhilda puffed out her tiny chest. "It's pride." Rias did not think it was pride, but she decided not to get into that argument. It took 15 hours to fly from Japan to Romania, where the vampire clans lived. Romania was a relatively large country located in southeastern Europe. Bordering the Black Sea on one side, Romania was surrounded by numerous other countries. The city where their private jet landed was Bucharest. There was a limousine at the airport that was waiting for them. The driver was, of course, a young female vampire with blood-red eyes, pale skin like that of a corpse, and the same blondish hair as Elmenhilda. That said, Rias thought the girl's looks were not as refined as Elmenhilda's impeccable and doll-like beauty. She determined this woman was a vampire like Gasper. "It will take at least 1 hour to reach vampire territory," Elmenhilda informed Rias, Kiba, and Azazel as they made themselves comfortable. The limousine was definitely luxurious, with soft leather seating that could be individually adjusted to suit each person's preference. Rias found herself wanting to play with the controls of her seat. She was certain the only thing keeping her from doing so was understanding that this desire was Naruto's influence. That man could not keep still and constantly had to be messing with something. She fondly recalled the first time he had rode in a limo and touched everything that looked interesting. "How are you feeling, Kiba?" Rias whispered to her bodyguard. "I am fine," Kiba said out of the side of his mouth. "Just keeping an eye out for anything suspicious." "I heard the vampires lived far away from human society," Rias said in a louder voice to distract herself from her desires. Elmenhilda nodded. "Although we acknowledge that we need humans to survive, we do not like associating with them. Of course, we also understand that keeping ourselves out of the limelight is for our own survival as well." "Do you know when I will be able to visit the Vladi family?" asked Rias. With a small scowl on her face, Elmenhilda said, "I will have to speak with Queen Carmilla. You should understand that our faction is currently at war with the Tepes faction. The House of Vladi is on the Tepes side. While I am certain my queen will be able to broker a meeting between you and the House of Vladi, you should expect it to take several days at least."
I understand. I just wanted to know what I should expect.
Since it looked like her questions were annoying Elmenhilda, Rias did not ask any more questions and instead decided to satisfy her curiosity about the chair. It seemed she could not only adjust the elevation but also the heat, how it conformed to her spinal cord, and it even extended a footrest. Gremory limos didn't have these features. She wondered if maybe she could convince her parents to adopt them whenever they decided to buy their next round of limos. The drive was mostly silent. Rias spent her time inside the limo looking out the window, staring at the passing scenery. It was night, but she could see just fine with her devil-enhanced eyesight. They had already left the city behind and were now traveling through a small road that looked like hardly anyone had tread upon it. Romania was a very green country, with forests, farmlands, and valleys populating much of the terrain. Even the mountains were covered in trees. The area they were passing through was a forest. Thick trees with large trunks and lush branches covered in green leaves lay on their left and right, swaying in the soft breeze. Rias wished she could roll down a window. She was certain the fresh scent of trees would be pleasant, but it was sadly quite cold in Romania, and the night made it even colder. Because of the late evening and perhaps her overactive imagination, Rias thought she saw shadows moving through the trees that weren't natural. There was nothing when she looked back, however. She sighed and turned away from the window to eye her two companions. Azazel looked the same as always, and Elmenhilda was sitting with her hands in her lap, prim and proper. The forest eventually vanished. She leaned back to look out the window as a small village appeared before them. It was very quaint. The buildings were made of plain stone and red tiles covered the roofs. Some of the buildings had a fence or wall protecting it, but most did not. There were a lot of people roaming the streets. All of them were pale-skinned and possessed crimson eyes. Many of them had a doll-like beauty that made them seem inhuman. As their limo passed one of these people, Rias looked at the young man's mouth and noticed the sharp fangs protruding from them. Vampires. Every one of the people outside was a vampire, which explained why this small village was so active at night. "This is the Carmilla faction's territory," Elmenhilda explained to Rias and Azazel. "My queen lives in a mansion in the very center of this village. She likes being able to see the people she rules. I'd heard that pureblood vampires have an even harder time giving birth than devils, thus their low birth rates," Azazel said as he studied the vampires they drove past. Many of the vampires were pointing at their limo, but they could not see inside of it because the windows were tinted. "This village isn't very big. I guess there was some truth to those rumors. We may not be able to give birth easily, but that hardly matters," Elmenhilda said with a scoff. "Vampires are immortal. We are eternity. We do not need to give birth very often to maintain our numbers, so there is little point in worrying about such matters. And yet that doesn't stop your kind from producing dampir with humans," Azazel pointed out. Elmenhilda shrugged. Every species has their foibles, and not all vampires care to force themselves on humans. "Why is it so foggy?" asked Rias as she noticed the thick blanket of fog covering the village. It wasn't so much that she couldn't see, but it was like a curtain of white mist hovered over everything. "That is Her Majesty Carmilla's mist," Elmenhilda said. "All vampires are able to manipulate fog," Azazel added, arms crossed as he too gazed out the window. "They often use it to create barrier or search for enemies. High-level vampires like Lady Carmilla can create enough fog to blanket an entire town and can even transform into fog itself to avoid attacks or escape if they are in danger." Elmenhilda snorted. "You certainly know a lot about vampires and our abilities." Azazel shrugged. "I make it a point to learn everything I can about other races." It did not take more than 10 minutes to reach the mansion. Large but elegant, the mansion looked more like a castle than a simple mansion. Several towers with crenellations for people to shoot arrows or fire spells from above gave it a defensible appearance. Flying buttresses ran along the outer walls. 4 towers jutted from the center and traveled up, ending in sharp points, and many of the windows viewable from their location were stained glass depicting the House of Carmilla's family crest. The limo drove up to the front, where Elmenhilda's bodyguards opened the door for her and allowed them to step outside. A brisk chill entered Ria's bones and caused her to shiver. She would have hugged her arms, but doing so might have been seen as a sign of weakness. Elmenhilda didn't even seem to register the cold. "Man, is it chilly?" Azazel had none of the trouble expressing himself that she did. He grabbed his arms and rubbed them as he shivered in a manner that was so exaggerated she thought he might be faking to garner sympathy. Not that it worked. Elmenhilda merely scoffed at him. "This weather is nothing. If you think this is bad, you'll die when winter comes. Now hurry up. I will show you to the guest quarters, where you will be staying while I report to Queen Carmilla." They were left with little choice but to follow Elmenhilda as she led them up a wide staircase that led toward the entrance. A pair of double doors guarded by two vampires who vaguely reminded Rias of knights. Each vampire held open a door as Elmenhilda stepped up, allowing their group to pass through. What Rias discovered inside the palace was a marvelous entrance hall with a marble floor, black like the night itself. The walls had candles situated inside elegant candelabras. Each one provided enough illumination to let them see just fine, but it didn't give this place a warm atmosphere. Vampires liked dark spaces. And this castle was a prime example. Even though the entrance hall was magnificent, with many decorations to showcase the Carmilla faction's wealth, it was also cold and uninviting. Rias studied what she could of the mansion as Elmenhilda led them through the entrance hall. This place had a similar build to her family's mansion, though it was quite a bit smaller. The Gremory family home was a castle with a similar architectural style, a structure based on older European castles. The hallways were wide and lacked windows. Each hall had numerous doors that led to various rooms which seemed to serve no real purpose but were still fully furnished. It was just like her family's estate in that regard. They didn't actually need all those rooms, but they enjoyed showing off their wealth. Devils and vampires were not much different in that regard. There were quite a few maids scurrying about. Rias noticed a distinct lack of butlers, but she guessed that was natural in the female-dominated Carmilla faction. She knew the faction didn't disdain men. Even so, she was certain Queen Carmilla preferred being surrounded by women thanks to the battle between her faction and the Tepes faction. "This is where you will stay for the time being," Elmenhilda said as she showed Rias, Kiba, and Azazel to their rooms. All three rooms were across from each other, connected by a living space where they could adjourn to should they need to speak with each other. The living space was large and did not contain much, but it did have a couch, some comfortable chairs, and a table with 2 chairs for them to drink tea. Azazel complained a little about how there wasn't a bar. Rias, however, had no issues with the living quarters, especially since she didn't plan on staying there for more than a day or two. "Please do not leave this room," Elmenhilda continued. "I have to inform Her Majesty Carmilla about your arrival." "That's fine," Rias said. "We will remain here. Guess we'll be kicking it back for a while." Azazel muttered with a sigh as he plopped on the couch, his posture lazy. Elmenhilda soon left the three of them alone. This was actually the first time Rias had ever been alone with Azazel. They did not have much contact outside of occult research club meetings and the few emergency situations they had dealt with together, but those were always in the presence of other people. "How long do you think it will take them to set up a meeting with the House of Vladi?" asked Rias as she sat on one of the chairs. "I'm not sure." Azazel stroked his beard. "I think it will depend on the House of Vladi's disposition and how well the meeting goes. It could take as little as 1 day or as long as several weeks. Honestly, it's hard to say more without fully understanding the situation here." "I guess," Rias sighed. She'd been hoping to hear something more concrete than that. It looked like they would be playing the waiting game. Devil Ninja, with Rias gone. Akeno was in charge of the Gremory peerage's activities in Kuo. A lot of that involved dealing with the various factions now making Kuo their home. This meant speaking with the angels, the fallen angels, and the displaced Norse gods under the rule of Rosavice's grandmother. She was kind of like a mediator who went out to settle disputes, allocate land, and help set budgets for each race. Aside from dealing with the factions, there was also the paperwork involved in governing a city. Most of this involved reading over reports on suspicious activity, looking at documents sent in from the underworld, and creating policies to settle disputes that occasionally cropped up between the factions who now made this city their home. Now, on top of that, there was also helping the other members pick a mage to become contracted to. Because all of these tasks were very time-consuming and Akeno did not have Ria's talent for paperwork and management, some of these tasks had been delegated to Naruto, who could officially help as a high-class devil. If there was one thing Naruto hated after becoming a high-class devil, it was the paperwork. Had anyone told him this was what he could look forward to after earning his rank, he would have told them to suck it. He did not sign up to have his ass sitting in a chair and signing papers all day. Naruto sighed as he looked at the latest report, which was about a dispute between a younger pureblood devil who had moved to Kuo recently and an angel who had come here on vacation. They'd gotten into a huge fight that ended up destroying several buildings. The buildings had fortunately been repaired when members of the Sea-Tree Peerage arrived on the scene and no one was injured, but the incident had still caused a huge ruckus. To make matters worse, several humans had seen them and needed to have their memories erased, which meant Naruto had to file paperwork for each one of those people so they would have a document of whose memory got erased on file. Apparently, the two had been fighting over a woman. Disputes like this were actually an exception rather than the rule. Most devils and angels got along just fine now, especially the younger ones who hadn't experienced the three-way war firsthand. There was no bad blood between them. Even this particular incident appeared to be one caused by hormones and testosterone rather than racism. Naruto supposed that was a good thing. Fights like this were normal. At the same time, they couldn't have people destroying buildings every time a hot chick came along. Especially because the hot chick in question had not been interested in either of them. Just as Naruto was in the process of writing up a new incident report discussing reparations and punishment to the parties involved, the door to his office opened and in walked Ravel. The blonde girl was dressed in a simple purple gown that stretched taut across her chest and swished around her ankles. She was pushing a small trolley with a tea set on it. "Naruto-sama, I thought you could use a break, so I brought some refreshments," Ravel said as she closed the door and finished pushing the cart up to his desk. "You're a lifesaver, Ravel," Naruto cried as he shoved the papers off to the side to make room. "I love you so much." "Tea? They're just cookies and tea," Ravel stuttered and blushed. "It's nothing to get worked up over." "They're your cookies and tea," Naruto corrected. "And I haven't had a chance to eat since breakfast. That damn sadist went off to speak with the Norse and left me with all the paperwork." Ravel blushed as she placed a plate, a tea set, and a platter of cookies in front of Naruto. The tea set and plate were items Rias owned and looked far too expensive to eat off of. The platter was just one of those plastic plates. It looked out of place, but Naruto assumed the one Ravel traditionally used when baking sweets was in the dishwasher. She'd been cooking sweets for him nearly every day since Rias left. "Well, a Kano is Rias-sama's representative, so whenever trouble arises that has to be dealt with personally, she's the only one we can turn to," Ravel reminded him. "I think she just wanted to get out of doing paperwork," Naruto grumbled. Ravel gave him a reassuring smile. "I'm sure that's not true. You don't know a Kano like I do." Naruto sighed as he brought the tea to his lips and took a slow sip. "Ah. So delicious. Who knew tea could hit the spot like this?" As a ramen fanatic, he mostly sustained himself on noodles and broth. Water? What the fuck was that? About the only thing he used to drink when he wasn't consuming miso like it was water was sake. And that was only because his pervert of a sensei forced him into it. Honest. It wasn't like getting drunk with a bunch of super hot women in a brothel was his idea of a good time. He didn't have a choice but to go through with it, or his sensei would have made fun of him for being a pussy, and Naruto was no pussy. He ate pussy for breakfast. Literally. At least once every morning, sometimes twice. "How are the cookies?" asked Ravel, fidgeting only a little. "They're delicious as always," Naruto said as he consumed two in quick succession. Even though he stuffed them into his mouth with little thought, he chewed slowly and thoughtfully to savor the taste. "But they taste a little different. Did you change your recipe?" "Yes. I normally use milk chocolate when making chocolate chip cookies, but this time I decided to use dark chocolate," Ravel explained. "Dark chocolate is a lot more nutritious and comes with numerous health benefits. They're a powerful source of antioxidants, they improve blood flow and lower blood pressure, and it even improves cognitive functions to the brain." "I hope you're not saying my brain is defective."
Oh, of course not. I would never say that. Relax. I'm just teasing.
"Oh, you." Naruto allowed himself to relax as he spoke with Ravel. One of his greatest pleasures in life was teasing this girl.
"How are the others?" he asked. "They are doing fine," Ravel said. "Last I saw of Eyes and Gasper, they were heading into the training hall. I think they are working on creating new techniques. Lefei is in the library again. Ever since Rosweiss brought her books on Norse magic over from gondolas, that girl hardly ever leaves the library. I think she's trying to incorporate new types of Norse magic into her current arsenal. Naruto nodded along as the girl spoke. Lefei was indeed studiously working on her magic day in and day out. They only really saw her during breakfast and dinner, as she often forewent lunch in favor of working on her magic. He had once asked her about the kind of magic she was cooking up, but all she would do was wink and tell him that she wanted to keep it a secret.
And Kaneko? How is her training going? Asked Naruto. Kaneko is. At that moment, the door slammed open, and Naruto and Revel turned to find the girl they were just about to discuss standing in the doorway.
She looked different than usual, however. Kaneko was normally a very petite girl. A bona fide Lolita, a woman of small stature with a small bust. If she were a meme, then they would have called her small. Such was not the case at the moment, however. The Nekosho standing before them was a white-haired beauty who was close to Naruto in height, had a figure that could compete with Rias Grimori, and was currently looking at Naruto like he was her next meal.
Ah, Kaneko? Naruto looked at the girl in shock. Why are you in Chiron mode? Kaneko didn't say anything as she stalked into the room. Naruto immediately spotted the way her cheeks were heavily flushed and the ragged breaths she took as she came forward. A strong scent overtook his nose, overpowering the cookies and tea the closer she got. It was a scent he recognized easily. The scent of an aroused woman. Before Naruto or Revel could react, Kaneko pounced, leaping clear over the desk, and landing on his lap. She hooked her legs around him and the chair. Her thighs had always been quite strong, but with her body enhanced by Chiron mode, they were even more powerful than normal. Their squishiness was also enhanced. Her body was normally quite thin, but with her new mode, her thighs had gone from cute to pleasantly plump. Chun-Li could not compete with these thighs. Kaneko, are you? Naruto was shut up before he could finish his sentence by Kaneko slamming their mouths together. It was. Well, it kind of hurt because they bashed teeth. But Kaneko did not seem to care as she ravaged the inside of his mouth with her tongue. Meanwhile, standing next to him, the shocked Revel could do nothing for several seconds as her mind recovered. What do you think you're doing? Revel shouted. Can you not see that Naruto-sama is in the middle of a break right now? He is trying to relax. Save your shenanigans for the bedroom, geez. It was clear to Naruto that Kaneko was not listening to Revel, or even in her right mind. His cat girlfriend was always straightforward when it came to what she wanted, but she knew better than to sex him up while he was working. Something must have gone wrong with her training. Of course, Naruto couldn't say that because Kaneko had shoved her tongue down his throat, ravaging the inside of his mouth like a fat man ravaging a poor girl in an NTR hentai. That was a really unpleasant way of saying she was kissing him silly. At that moment, as their tongues became entwined and saliva was being swapped between them, Kuroka came in through the open door. She took one look at the situation and sighed. Ha. I was afraid this would happen. Naruto wanted to ask what she meant, but his mouth was already occupied. To make matters worse, or better, he was quickly losing the will to pry Kaneko off. Her cat-like tongue was rougher than a normal human's and felt pleasant as it caressed the inside of his mouth. Without even realizing it, his hands had already landed on Kaneko's firm backside and began groping her nicely shaped ass. Damn! Her body was so soft now that his fingers were actually sinking into her butt cheeks. What do you mean? What happened? Fortunately, Revel had not lost her ability to speak. Chiron and I were training in how to use her newfound powers, but they began running out of control, Kuroka explained. Normally, this would mean her body would implode and she would blow up, but I think because she has been using bedroom arts every day, she became unbearably horny instead. Unbearably? So what should we do? Asked Revel. Right now, Chiron's powers are running rampant through her body. We need to disperse the powers inside of her by using bedroom arts. You mean she needs to have sex? Obviously. That's what I just said. Haven't you been paying attention? Of course I've been paying attention. I was making an exclamation for emphasis. Naruto stopped paying attention to the conversation at this point. There was a lovely catgirl grinding her wet crotch against his lap. His erection was becoming painful, and Kaneko's kiss was so passionate he had already lost feeling in his tongue. Really, if something wasn't done soon, he was gonna be the one suffering here. Shooting onto his feet, Naruto ignored Revel's surprised squawk as he swept aside her tea and cookies in favor of placing Kaniko's cute ass on the desk. He felt bad. Naruto had really wanted to finish her food, but he could no longer afford to delay or the blue balls were sure to hit him hard. Kaniko had already pulled back from their kiss and was now licking Naruto's neck, chest, and chin. She didn't hesitate to rip his shirt to shreds. He was glad he'd decided to wear one of his non-orange shirts today. The red fabric fluttered to the floor as Kaniko attacked his nipples with her tongue and teeth. She's a lot more aggressive. Like this, Naruto grunted and gasped. Sensations he hadn't felt even during his wildest nights raced through his body. Well, of course. Kuroka crossed her arms. She's currently dealing with super-powered hormones. You remember that aphrodisiac I gave you all to help you have sex all night long? It's like taking that. Except this time it's been directly injected into her bloodstream. Sounds bad. At this point, Naruto could no longer talk. Kaniko was not letting him. Since that was the case, he decided to stop holding back. He slipped a hand down her hakama pants, traced the curve of her beautiful mound, brushed his fingers through her trim patch of silver fur, and then found this pussy's pussy. It was soaking wet, sodden and warm. She must have been even more aroused than he'd realized. Naruto inserted a single finger and began pumping, then reached down with his other hand and rubbed her clit, which was already engorged. Nya, in, nya, Kaniko began mewling like a kitten high on catnip. The sound so erotic Naruto would have lost it if that hadn't already happened. Kaniko stopped licking his man nips at some point and dragged her tongue across his chiseled abs, all the way down to his pants. She slid off the desk, grabbed his drawers, and tore them apart. Naruto really hoped someone would grab him some new clothes when this was over with. He didn't feel like walking around the house in the buff. The moment his man meat sprang free, Kaniko became fixated. She grabbed it in her hand and began rubbing her cheek against it. Naruto didn't know what was odder: the way she was treating his dick her favorite toy or the purring noises emitting from the back of her throat. This is indecent, Revel muttered. Kinda late for that, isn't it? A lot of stuff we've done is indecent, Naruto said, only to groan as Kaniko took him into her mouth. Her mouth was far too small to fit all of him. She could not even take half of him into her mouth, but that didn't stop her from trying to please him, and Naruto nearly lost all the strength in his legs as she swirled her tongue around his bulbous head. Because it looked like he wouldn't be doing much right now, he reached out and began rubbing her cat ears, which seemed to arouse Kaniko further and egged her on to commit even more adulterous acts. She licked the underside of his shaft, slathered him in her saliva, and used her hands to rub what she couldn't stick into her mouth. As Naruto looked down at this gorgeous catgirl sucking him off, he found his willpower to resist losing. He came inside of her mouth. Kaniko somehow managed to drink everything. She can back up, pushed Naruto back onto the chair, and then straddled his waist. Naruto wasn't even given a chance to say anything as she slid his sword inside her sheath. She was warm, wet, and tight, but she wasn't as tight as he was used to. Maybe it was because this was a more grown-up body. It felt different, not bad, just different. Naruto let Kaniko lead the pace since she seemed intent on having her way. He grabbed her hips and began grinding alongside her. The electric feeling as they became one invigorated every nerve in his body, hyperstimulating him and making him want to feel even more. He crushed the woman to his chest, enjoying the feel of her massive breasts squishing against him, leaned down, and kissed her for all he was worth. Kaniko gladly returned his kisses. The world around them disappeared as Naruto and Kaniko had some of the hottest sex of their life. The fact that they were screwing in his personal office just made the situation more erotic. It reminded him of a hentai he'd once read about an office worker who seduced his boss, except this was kind of the reverse of that. This thought actually made him more aroused than usual. His nasally gasps and Kaniko's cat-like mewling as their fuck mixed with the sounds of sex, the lewd schlooping sound as his cock churned her insides. He wished he could look down and see how his dick was spreading her apart. The feelings were already intense. It was like her walls were gently rubbing every inch of him. Naruto was finally unable to stand it anymore and came inside of her again. Despite this, he still hadn't stopped thrusting his hips, which was hard given he was sitting on a chair. This position made any movements difficult. He had to plant his feet firmly on the ground and buck his hips up in time with Kaniko's downward thrusts. At least he was still going strong. Kaniko had not come yet, and he was not the type of man who'd let himself come and not his partner. He reached down and began rubbing her lower back. Finding the area that made cats go crazy was easy since he'd used this tactic plenty of times already. It was just a matter of applying pressure. Kaneko was already on edge, her breathing heavy, her eyes lidded, and drool leaking from both lips. He was almost expecting steam to start wafting from her mouth. As he rubbed against her erogenous zone, Kaneko realized a loud "Nya" as she arched her back and came hard. Her juices drenched his thighs and the chair. The way her pussy shuddered also caused him to come again. Ha. Ha. Nya. Naruto. You back with us? Asked Naruto. Nya. I'll take that as a no. After coming once, Kaneko seemed to have calmed down, though she still refused to remove herself from his lap. It was at this point that Naruto remembered there were two other people in the room. You two okay? He asked. Oh, I'm fine. Just fine. Kuroka licked her lips and smiled. That said, I can now see what Sharon sees in you. I'm interested in having a piece of that Naruto man meat for myself. How about it? Want to take me for a spin next? Only if Kaneko's okay with it, Naruto said. Naruto, Revel began. Yes. It was only after Naruto turned his head in her direction that he realized Revel was rubbing her thighs together and covering her crotch with her hands. Her cheeks were flushed bright red as she stared at him with embarrassment and hope. When he saw that look, he realized that he probably wouldn't get any work done for the rest of the day. Devil Ninja. Naruto woke up several hours later to find two very naked women pressed against him and one fully clothed woman sitting on his chest. The naked women were Revel and Kaneko. The two were snuggled deeply into his torso, their heads resting his shoulders, eyes closed and breathing even. Kaneko had reverted back to her original petite figure, which meant the combination of Tuki and Senjutsu energy must have been exorcised from her body. He supposed that was good. Maybe. He kind of missed busty Kaneko. In either event, it looked like having sex for however many hours they'd done it had fixed her problem. Revel was equally naked and had hooked one of her legs around his as she pressed her full breasts against him. Office, Naruto greeted the woman on his chest. Although she was technically wearing clothes, her nipples were only covered with black tape. This wasn't a problem back when she was just a loli, but ever since she decided to change her body to something more palatable with Naruto's sexual preference, her boobs were incredibly distracting. This was especially so for a virile young man who just had sex. I am not very happy that you had fun with Revel and Kaneko without inviting me. Office leaned over and glared at him, or he thought she was glaring at him. Her sweater stuffers were in his face, distracting him, so it was hard to tell. Couldn't be helped, Naruto muttered. Something weird happened to Kaneko, she just jumped me. You say that like it's a bad thing, a sarcastic voice said in his ear. Naruto turned his head to see bright yellow eyes staring at him. Kaneko's expression was the same deadpan as usual, but there was also a healthy glow about her. It was the kind of glow only a woman who had been thoroughly satisfied in bed could have. The young Nekusho sat up and stretched, heedless of her nudity as her cat ears twitched and her tail curled in the air. Naruto was drawn toward her tiny breasts. He liked them bigger, but he wouldn't deny that Kaneko's were very cute. Her small nipples were tempting him to latch on and suckle on them. If you're just gonna stare at them, you might as well start licking them, Kaneko said. Tempting, but I don't think I can afford to do that now, Naruto said with a sigh. I had a lot of paperwork that I was doing, and I didn't get to finish it. I bet Akano is gonna be pissed. Ufufufu. What makes you say that? Asked someone by the door. Naruto lifted his head to find the sadist he'd been talking about standing in his doorway, a bright smile on her face, her eyes closed, and a demonic aura erupting from her body. He blinked several times. Then he glared. Do you ever knock, you damn sadist? Of course I do. I knocked several times. Maybe if you actually paid attention to your surroundings, you would have noticed. Okay. Good point. But that still doesn't mean you can barge into my bedroom while I am naked. It's your fault you're naked. If you don't want me to see you, then hurry up and get dressed. You still have a lot of work to get done. Akano didn't give him time to reply with a snappy retort before leaving and shutting the door behind her. Naruto glared at the door before he realized his time relaxing was officially over. Since he had no choice but to get up, Naruto quickly shook Revel awake, then moved over and began rummaging through his drawer for some underwear and a pair of pants under the watchful eyes of Kaneko and Office. He tried to ignore their hungry stares. He was as insatiable as the next horny male, but he did have responsibilities. Ah. Naruto. This is. Ravel had just fully awakened and sat up by the time Naruto put on his pants. She quickly tried to cover her chest with a blanket, but Naruto interrupted her by leaning over and kissing her on the lips. "Hurry up and get dressed. We were interrupted before I could finish my work," he said. "Ah. Yes. Right. Work." Ravel was somewhat dazed, but she still went about gathering her clothes and putting them back on. They were lucky her clothes were in his bedroom. He couldn't remember where they had stripped her, but for all he knew, it could have been while they were rushing to his bedroom. "Where is my kiss?" asked Kaneko. "I want one too," Office added.
Naruto rolled his eyes as he leaned over and kissed them both, though Office was a bit needier than Kaneko. She kept him engaged longer by plundering his mouth with her tongue. He imagined she would not be letting him sleep tonight.
Once everyone was dressed, they made their way to his office, which was a bit messy. Naruto grumbled as he began picking up the papers that lay strewn across the floor. These were the documents and reports he'd been reading. They must have been knocked over when he and Kaneko had sex, and now they were all mixed up, so he wasn't sure which ones he had already finished. Which meant he needed to go over them again. "Great. Thanks for the help, you three," Naruto said as he finished stacking the papers on his desk. Kaneko, Ravel, and Office had gracefully lent him a hand in grabbing and cataloging his messy papers. Thanks to them, what might have taken several hours only took one. Now Naruto was ready to begin tackling his paperwork once more. "You're welcome," Ravel said with a charming smile. "Anytime," Kaneko added. "If you really want to thank me, you will have sex with me tonight," Office said in an imperious tone that made Naruto wish he could laugh because she wasn't being serious. Except she was. She was very serious. He already knew he wouldn't be getting any sleep. Woe is me. Naruto sat down and set about working. Kaneko and Office didn't much care to see him handling papers, but Ravel always remained by his side when he did this. As a high-class devil herself, she understood what it involved better than anyone save Rias. She often helped him whenever he had a problem. Plus she was his manager. Just as he was about finished, his doors burst open once again, but it wasn't a horny Kaneko this time. It was Sear's. "Oto, the underworld is calling and demanding you and I's become Sentai superheroes." "Huh?" was Naruto's intelligent response. "Devil Ninja, BWA ha 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 ha. Do you really think you can beat me, Oppai Rangers? You three must be dreaming." "Ku. He's too strong. Even after we combined our powers, we were still no match for him." Naruto was kneeling on the ground, struggling to stand up. Nobody could see his face. That was because of the Kamen Rider. Because of the Oppai Ranger mask he donned. It was an orange mask, because orange was cool. And it was complemented by his all-orange bodysuit, because orange was cool. Kneeling on the ground beside him was Issei dressed in a similar suit but one that was red, and Gasper who was dressed as a magical girl. The person looming before them was decked out in a crimson suit that would have looked similar to theirs, but it had spikes lining the shoulders, knees, and elbows, making it look evil. The visor of his helmet was also narrower and held a more ominous appearance. Crimson eyes gazed at them from within the black slits. "I don't have much power left, you too," Gasper said in a strained voice. "I'm running on empty as well," Naruto admitted. "Aw, this sucks. What should we do?" asked Issei as he slammed his fist into the ground. "BWA ha ha ha. Give up, Oppai Rangers. There is no way you can defeat me," Satan Red. As Satan Red spoke, he made some very weird and exaggerated hand gestures that were kind of comical. Of course, Naruto, Issei, and Gasper did not break character and laugh, as that would have upset the children. Speaking of. "Oh no!" a young lady exclaimed into a microphone as she stared at the audience of kids several meters away. Satan Red is about to defeat the Oppai Dragon and his lively companions, Foxyvenger and White Knight. What will they do? The kids were already on the edge of their seats, and her words only further served to excite them and increase the tension. Many of the kids started shouting words like, "Don't give up," and, "You can do this, Oppai Dragon." It was honestly endearing, except Naruto didn't know how these kids' mothers could be okay with them screaming, "Boob Dragon," in public like this.
Just how did Issei and his love for tits become so popular in the underworld anyway?
Oppai dragon, Naruto said with a strained groan. I think we need to use that technique. That technique? Issei turned to look at Naruto. You mean? Yes. Let's summon boobs. But we don't have enough power, Gasper exclaimed. He seemed to be having fun with his role, but Naruto thought he sensed a lot of fear in the boy as well. Then, let's ask the kids to help us. Issei turned to the children in the audience, and Irina, who was standing in her seat and screaming at them not to give up. We're going to summon boobs, but we do not have the power to summon them on our own. We need your help, kids. Everyone, I need you to scream, Oppai. Oppai. Naruto thought he might go deaf as all the kids in the audience screamed their lungs out. He had no idea they could be so loud. Their voice resounded across the small stage and caused the very ground to shake, or it seemed that way to him. I can feel it working, Issei exclaimed. Yes, with your power, we can summon tickle bitties. At that moment, Satan Red was forced to leap back as the ground between him and their group exploded. The reason he leapt was not because of the explosion. Red smoke erupted everywhere as a small section of the floor disappeared and a platform with a figure on it rose from the ground. The figure was Akano, who looked mildly amused and partially annoyed. She was dressed in a red and white shrine maiden outfit, which suited her Yamato Nadeshiko looks perfectly. Thank you, everyone, because of you, we have summoned boobies, Issei exclaimed. Era. Akano covered her mouth with a hand. I'm not sure I approve. Oppai dragon. What are you doing here? What's going on? I'm afraid there is no time to explain. Please, I need to poke your headlights. Well, if you must. Go ahead. Issei did not actually poke Akino's tatas, which probably would have gotten him arrested for sexual harassment even here in the underworld. A screen lit up behind him and showed Issei's 2 index fingers pressing down on something that looked like nipples.
Ah yeah, I feel the power. At that moment, Issei's body came alive with lights as power exploded from him. Armor appeared on his body, crimson red and extremely powerful. This was Issei's balance breaker, a weapon so powerful that it could easily destroy a city, and he was using it as part of a stage performance for a Sentai show in the underworld.
With the Oppai dragon powered up, Issei was more than capable of defeating Satan Red, much to the delight of the audience. The performance soon ended. Naruto, Issei, and Gasper found themselves in the back room as several makeup artists helped them remove all the makeup they were wearing. There was so much on that Naruto thought his entire face was covered in powder. I think we did a good job, Gasper said. Damn right, we did, Issei exclaimed. We were awesome. I'm still not sure how you became the most popular person among us, Naruto mumbled. Do kids in the underworld really love how obsessed with boobs you are? Hell if I know. Issei shrugged. I'm just sort of going with the flow here. They found out through Searsex that Issei had become very popular among the children of the underworld, who apparently loved the way he kept talking about boobs during his rating game matches. They had begun calling him the Oppai dragon and even gave him a theme song. This unprecedented popularity had given Searsex the idea of doing stage performances. In other words, Super Sentai shows. Naruto, Gasper, and Issei were part of the Oppai Rangers, boob-loving fighters who fought for tits and justice, and Issei was their leader, the Oppai dragon. It was kind of ridiculous, but Naruto supposed that was the underworld for you. Gasper was the mascot character. As the makeup artists finished removing their makeup, the doors opened and in walked Ravel, Rosweiss, Kaneko, Akano, Rainier, Irina, Gasper, Xenovia, Asia, and even Searsex, who was still dressed in his Satan Red armor. Yes, Searsex was indeed Satan Red. When he had discussed the possibility of turning them into a Super Sentai team like a certain popular human show, he had demanded that he also be a part of this. Thus Satan Red had been born. He was a villain who had once been on the side of good, but he had become corrupted by the evil supervillain, who had not been introduced or even named yet because they were still trying to think of who should play the part. That was a magnificent performance, you three, Searsex said. He was wearing a large smile. Out of all the people who had come to take part in this event, Naruto was certain Searsex was having the most fun. Thanks, the three said in unison. I still can't believe an Oppai-obsessed dragon has become the #1 most popular hit in the underworld, Rosweiss said. placing a hand against her face to emphasize her disbelief. I'm just wondering what Rias will think when she hears her own brother wanted to get in on the action, Kaneko said. Sirzex laughed. I'm sure she'll be fine with it. She'll be more stressed than a crack addict who can't get his fix, Kaneko returned. I can't believe you people actually turned this into a show. Rainier grumbled with a displeased look on her face. This is the stupidest thing I have ever seen. Oofufufu. You're just jealous that I was used in the summoning ritual to help I's power up, Akeno said. You're damn right I am. What's so great about your tits anyway? My twins could power him up even better. Naruto wondered if those two would ever get along, but it seemed like arguing had become their habit. He decided not to focus on the two and instead turned to Sirzex. I wonder, do you think I can also take part in this performance next time? Zenovia wondered out loud. I'm sure you can, Asia said with a determined smile. We just need to ask Sirzex. I bet you anything he'd give you a part. Oh, I want to play a role too, Irina shouted enthusiastically. Has there been any news related to the Chaos Brigade? Naruto asked, ignoring the conversation between the church trio. Sirzex shook his head. I'm afraid not. The Chaos Brigade has mostly gone underground. They are still harassing our forces, but there hasn't been a direct confrontation since you rescued Ophis and destroyed the hero faction. Naruto really wanted to know what the Chaos Brigade was up to, but more than that, he wanted to know where Yami went. He was worried about what his other half might be up to. Yami still possessed the majority of their power. Naruto's only trump card right now was his ability to reverse summon Kurama, but that required a lot of time, preparation, and several thousand hand seals. It wasn't something he could just use on a whim. There was not much left for their group to do, so after heading out to their signing event and meeting with the kids, everyone traveled back to the human world, and life continued on as normal. Devil Ninja, Naruto was walking to school with the other members of Rias Peerage. There was also Irina, Rainier, Ophis, and Revel, who were not a part of her peerage that were walking with them. He was sure Rosswise would have liked to travel to school with them as well, but it would have looked bad for a teacher to walk to school with her students. People would have asked questions. She also had to arrive an hour earlier than they did because she needed to attend teacher meetings. We're taking a field trip to the aquarium today. Revel was telling Naruto about what she and Kaneko were doing this day. It should be fun. Are you sure a flaming chicken like you will be okay surrounded by water? Asked Kaneko. How rude. I am not afraid of a little water. And what about you? I heard pussycats don't like getting wet. Okay, you too. There's no need to get into an argument this early in the morning, is there? The one who tried to break them up was not Naruto, but Irina, who had imposed herself between the two. Of course there is, Kaneko said. I can't let her insults go, Revel added. Irina found herself unable to stop the two from fighting, so Naruto just pulled her back and said, don't worry about them. You know they do this all the time, but they're really good friends. I guess. Irina sighed. Thank you for looking out for them though, Naruto said before he leaned in and kissed her on the cheek. You're welcome. Irina squeaked like a frightened squirrel and moved back over to Asia and Zenovia. The two girls easily included her in their conversation. It was only a 15 walk from home to school, so they made great time and split up after saying goodbye. It wasn't long before the school gates came into view. As always, their group brought a lot of attention, but they were so used to being the focal point of everyone's stares that none of them were bothered anymore. Naruto turned to face Kaneko and Revel. I want you two to be extra cautious while you're at the aquarium. Don't forget that the Chaos Brigade may still be after Revel. We haven't received any reports of them infiltrating Kuo right now, but that doesn't mean they can't be lying in wait somewhere. Kaneko, I'll be counting on you to have Revel's back if something happens. Be sure to contact me. Don't worry, Kaneko said with a determined glare. I'll protect this fried chicken with my life. Oh, honestly, don't you ever get tired of calling me that? Of course not. Because they were in public and Naruto didn't want to be known as a womanizer. Even though he kind of was, Naruto merely rubbed their heads as he said goodbye to the pair. Everyone split up after saying goodbye. Akeno went her own way. She was the only senior among them. Asia, Issei, Rainier, and Zenovia all shared classes together. Meanwhile, Naruto traveled with Irina, who he shared classes with. There was a time before when Irina was disappointed she wasn't in the same class as Issei, Asia, and Zenovia. That was before she and Naruto started dating. Now that they had become a couple, she seemed happier to be with him. School was the same as always. Naruto found himself taking surprising comfort in the normality that was classes, something he'd have never done back when he was younger. Having all kinds of new responsibilities shoved onto him was the likely culprit for this change of heart. He'd become a high-class devil, but all that seemed to mean was he had even more responsibilities now than he used to. As he sat at his desk, taking notes as Roswise lectured them, his thoughts went to Ravel and Kaneko. They should be at the aquarium by now. He wondered if they were enjoying their time there. Naruto could already imagine them arguing over something simple like whether or not the fish trapped within the tanks would make good food or something similar. The thought brought a smile to his face. "Don't be too complacent, Naruto." Naruto perked up when Kurama's voice suddenly entered his mind. Roswise was still lecturing their class. Everyone else was either diligently taking notes or fantasizing about the woman who was teaching them. Irina was one of the more diligent students. "It's been a while since I've heard from you, Kurama. And what do you mean by complacent?" "HMPH. I am not surprised you have not sensed it since you've been forced to cut yourself off from Senjutsu chakra. The reason I have been so quiet is because I was extending my senses around Kuo Academy. There are a lot of new presences thanks to the alliance between the three factions, and that has made it difficult to sense potential intruders." Naruto didn't say anything at first, but then, slowly, he asked, "Does that mean you have sensed something?" "I have, though I don't know where it is coming from. Multiple presences have been appearing at the edge of my perception for some time now. I have tried tracking them, but it seems they are being extra cautious and have stayed away from the areas we spend most of our time. The only times I've been able to sense them is when you deviate from your usual routine, such as when you take your women on dates." Naruto stopped writing in his notebook and paid more attention to what Kurama was telling him. It sounded like there was a very real chance a group of people with hostile intentions had infiltrated Kuo without their knowledge. He would have liked to believe such a thing wasn't possible, but he also understood it would be much easier to infiltrate now that so many people from various races were making this place their home. While Naruto was thinking about this, a cough echoed from the front. "Mr. Uzumaki, are my lectures really so boring that you feel the need to space out, or are you perhaps so knowledgeable about this subject that you don't feel the need to listen to me?" Naruto looked toward the front of the class and found Roswise staring at him with a very dissatisfied expression on her face, which was red and made her seem like she was on the verge of crying. Whenever this normally happened, Naruto would joke around with her. This time he actually felt bad. It had not been his intention to ignore Roswise, and he had even been dutifully taking notes just seconds prior. But then Kurama had given him that warning and his thoughts turned inward. Of course, he could not tell her about what Kurama said right now. That would have to wait for after class. "I'm sorry," Naruto sincerely apologized. "I'll pay more attention." Roswise appeared startled by the sincerity in his voice, but she coughed into her hand and said, "Be very well. Please pay more attention. Everything I'm teaching you right now will be on your upcoming test." Naruto once more focused on Roswise as she lectured them and wrote notes on the board. She was a very good teacher. He noticed Irina casting him a glance out of the corner of their eyes, but he merely shook his head at her and mouthed, "Later." Class eventually ended and the next class began. It was math. Naruto neither cared for math nor did he like the teacher, so he replaced himself with a clone and slipped out of the classroom. Wandering the halls by walking on the ceiling, Naruto made his way toward the teacher's office, which was where all the teachers went when they weren't busy. There, he found Roswise sitting alone as she did some work on her computer. "Hey," he said from the ceiling. "Oi!" Roswise shrieked and leapt to her feet, but sadly, her foot caught her chair and she tumbled backward. She would have hit the ground if Naruto didn't jump down and catch her. "Careful," Naruto said as he steadied the woman so she wouldn't fall. "You're the one who should be careful," Roswise snapped. "You scared me half to death. And what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be in class? You have math, if I'm not mistaken." "I ditched," Naruto said. "Don't tell a teacher you ditched class so casually." Roswise seemed a bit more sulky than usual, which Naruto realized might be his fault. They hadn't done much together lately because they were both so busy. Roswise made frequent trips to the Norse territory alongside Akano. Naruto had meanwhile been spending most of his time in his office, reading through reports, filing reports when disputes took place, and writing up new policies. Kaneko, Ravel, and Ophis were the only girls he'd had sex with in the last few days since Rias left for Europe. "Sorry, I actually ditched because I have something important to tell you," Naruto said. As he launched into an explanation of what Kurama told him, Roswise became a lot more serious. She didn't say anything as he spoke, not even to ask questions, opting to sit with her arms crossed and her expression pensive. Even after he finished, she didn't say anything right away. "I'm glad to know the reason you weren't paying attention to me was because of something serious like this," Roswise said at last, sighing. "You are right to worry. Gondal has also mentioned to me that she has been sensing strange magic emanations appearing and disappearing randomly around Kuo as well. So you think it might be possible that mages from the Chaos Brigade have infiltrated the city?" asked Naruto. "It is certainly possible, though I do not enjoy entertaining the thought." Roswise paused as she placed her left leg over her right, put her hands on her knee, and adopted a pensive but thoughtful expression. There are many types of magic that can be used to conceal yourself from others. However, these spells will always leave traces behind. Coincidentally, the traces of magic Gondal has been sensing match what I know of concealment magic. It is entirely possible the person or people concealing themselves are mages from the Chaos Brigade. "And we just let Revel go on a field trip with minimal guards," Naruto muttered. He'd had a bad feeling ever since Kurama told him about the presences he sensed, and now with Roswise telling him about Gondal sensing the same thing and the concealing magic, that bad feeling had grown. It turned into a squirming ball in the pit of his stomach. Slipping a hand into his pocket, Naruto pulled out his cell phone. It was not something he used often because there was rarely a need for it. Devils could communicate telepathically and most preferred contacting people using devices that created hologram-like figures so they could talk face to face. However, Naruto was a firm believer in having modern conveniences like this just in case he couldn't contact someone via magic. Everyone who lived with him had a cell phone. Naruto quickly found Revel's contact information and pressed the call button. He listened to the sound of ringing as he waited for Revel to pick up the phone, but it soon went into voicemail. He called twice more. When she still didn't pick up, he called Kaneko in the hopes she would pick up, but that also turned out to be useless. "Neither of them are picking up," Naruto said with worry. "It's possible they're currently occupied or left their phones in their lockers." Roswise didn't sound like she believed her own words, but was offering them simply to present a possibility. Naruto shook his head. "I don't think that's it. Sorry, but do you mind if I skip school for the rest of the day? I'll have my clones take my place." Roswise looked stressed when he asked this question, but she couldn't do much more than sigh. "Oh, all right. You can go and see if Revel and Kaneko are safe. I would feel awful if something happened to them. However, should it turn out this was a false alarm, you will have to attend a nightly lesson with me." "That's fine. To be honest, I really hope this does turn out to be a false alarm." With Roswise giving him the okay as his homeroom teacher, Naruto leapt through the window and hit the ground running, his destination the aquarium. Devil Ninja, the aquarium seemed like an entirely different world to Revel, who had never been to the ocean, never swam beneath the sea. Each floor seemed to have different schools of fish. On the very first floor were creatures found close to the surface. There were all kinds of fish, of course, but there were also otters, penguins, seals, and dolphins. They each had their own exhibit area. In the very center of this aquarium was a large glass cylinder that had many types of sea animals. It extended all the way to the top of the building. Because their class was so big, the teacher had them split up into groups and go their separate ways. They were supposed to meet back up at the lobby by 12. Revel was grouped with Kaneko and Milteld, the fallen angel who had at one point been Reinare's lackey. She didn't quite get along with Milteld, but she didn't hate the blonde fallen angel either. She seemed like an okay girl. "Hey, crow feathers. Check this out. Did you just say my wings look like a crow's?" "I did. So what? Why you are just as bad as that damn Naruto." "I'll take that as a compliment." There was also the fact that when Miltelt was around, Kaneko spent more time teasing her than she did Revel. That was a good thing. It was definitely a good thing. Revel didn't enjoy being teased by Kaneko. Certainly not. And she wasn't jealous that Kaneko seemed to enjoy teasing Miltelt more than she did her. That would be stupid. Still, could you two hurry up? If we keep standing around like this, we won't be able to see the other exhibits. Yes, even though she wasn't bothered one bit by how Kaneko was paying more attention to some fallen angel than to her. Revel needed to split them apart so they could get moving. It was fortunate neither of them suspected she might be feeling lonely. The two girls wandered over to her as they traveled to the second floor by walking along the elevated walkway that spiraled around the central display. Revel found herself staring at the many aquatic creatures swimming through the water. There weren't just fish but also turtles, manta rays, sharks, and even what looked like a baby whale. Do all these creatures live in the ocean? She asked no one in particular. Of course they do, Kaneko muttered. Where else would they live? I don't know. It's not like I've ever gone to the ocean before. I haven't even gone to the beach, Revel snapped. You haven't even been to the beach before? Miltelt snickered into her hand. That's just pathetic. I've been to the beach many times in the past. Oh, how I miss the beautiful white sand and gentle waves. Revel glared at Miltelt, who she knew was trying to make her jealous, but it wouldn't work. She wasn't going to get jealous that someone had gone to the beach a lot while she hadn't been there even once. Noble pureblood devils like her didn't get jealous of others. You jelly? Asked Kaneko. I'm not, Revel shouted. Don't worry. We can just ask Naruto if he'll take us to the beach, Kaneko assured her. Revel was about to shout again that she wasn't jealous, but then the words penetrated her brain. They could get Naruto to take them to the beach. As that thought filled her mind, Revel imagined what it would be like if Naruto did take them to the beach. She would pick out a cute swimsuit to wear, something that her future husband would compliment her on, and then he would apply suntan lotion to her back. Just imagining the feeling of his hands rubbing lotion on her made Revel dizzy. Afterward, they would play in the water, go swimming and maybe even snorkeling, and then, later that night, they would make sweet love on the white sands. Damn girl, you got a major female boner for that dickweed. What's so great about that guy anyway? Miltelt's words snapped Revel out of her daydream. Hearing what this girl called her future husband caused Revel and Kaneko to both glare at her, which sent the girl rocking on her heels. You don't know the first thing about Naruto-sama. I'd like to ask that you kindly keep your mouth shut. Talk about my man like that again, and your ass is grass. Okay, geez, I won't say anything more about your man. Because Revel was a bundle of curiosity, they stopped at each floor and checked out all the exhibits. The information on the different aquatic creatures was located next to each exhibit. Revel read all the information about the various types of creatures found within the ocean. Kaneko and Miltelt didn't seem as interested as she was, but they had both lived in the human world for much longer than she had, so their lack of interest was understandable. Neither of them seemed to realize how lucky they were. Noon eventually hit, and their group met the other students in their class at the lobby. Their homeroom teacher gathered them all up and had them travel outside. This aquarium was rather large and had its own place to eat, but they had decided on not going there because of its limited selection of food. It was much warmer outside than it was inside. The aquarium had been somewhat chilly. Their large group walked down the street, the homeroom teacher at the front, and wandered into a nearby food court that had everything from fast food chains to yakisoba stands. What should we get? Asked Revel. I think we should try one of those ramen stands, Kaneko said. Ramen is Naruto-sama's favorite food. Everyone who was anyone knew about Naruto's two obsessions. The color orange and ramen. She didn't quite know how he became obsessed with either of those, but they were well-documented facts by this point, and Revel had seen the way Naruto could devour bowl after bowl of the stuff without stopping. It was like he had a bottomless stomach specifically for ramen. I don't want anything that man likes to eat, Miltelt complained. We should get a hamburger. Those are better. Revel was just about to tell the girl to stop complaining, but before she could even consider it, the world around her suddenly vanished. No, not vanished. The world was still there, but all the people who had been milling about were now gone. Only her, Kaneko, and Miltelt remained. What's more, the sky above them had become an odd murky color with nebulous swirls creating streaks through what should have been a clear blue sky. Revel's eyes widened. Someone's created a barrier, Kaneko said as she slid her feet against the ground and adopted a combat stance. White cat ears suddenly appeared on her head and a tail emerged from underneath her skirt. The tail split into two as the Nekusho entered Nekomata mode 2. Oh, what the hell is up with this? Miltelt growled as a spear of light appeared in her han and black wings erupted from her back. I didn't sign up for this. Revel was able to easily determine that someone had been waiting for them to walk out of the aquarium and set up this trap for them. She quickly went through all the information she had learned as Naruto's personal aide during this time period, coming to a conclusion that chilled her blood. "I think we just fell into a trap set by mages of the Chaos Brigade," she said. "No shit," Kaneko muttered. "Aw, damn it. I should have known tagging along with you two would be trouble," Miltelt complained. Revell ignored Miltelt's complaining as she looked at Kaneko. "Can you find them?" Kaneko nodded and didn't turn her head as she answered. "There are 10 of them on the roof surrounding us and another 10 hidden behind the buildings. The strongest one is on the roof located to our left." "So we're surrounded?" Miltelt shouted in shock before a scowl crossed her face. "Well, that's just fucking great. Guess this is what I get for becoming involved with your group. Why are you people always getting into trouble?" "Now isn't the time for that," Revell snapped. She ignored the other blonde girls scowling and tried to think about what they should do in this situation. In chess, there was a maneuver called entrapment, which was a basic tactic in which one side attacks an enemy chess piece that has no squares to move to. Their situation was similar to that. They were trapped on all sides, and if they wanted to escape, they needed to break the entrapment by attacking where the group was weakest. In other words, they needed to attack on the opposite side of where the strongest enemy was located. "Kaneko!" Revell shouted as she exploded with power. Wings of fire erupted from her back as she turned around and raised her hands. The air grew hot, distortions appearing as the heat created waves in the atmosphere. Fire coalesced on her hand, quickly gathering to form a sphere that she launched down on Ali. A loud scream erupted from down that way as the alley exploded with a gout of flames. NYA! Several white spheres flew from Kaneko's hands, tiny balls of senjutsu chakra that she hurled at the numerous enemies she could sense hiding. Her aim was true. The attacks blasted through the walls of buildings and struck her enemies dead on. Each attack erupted with power that sent her foes soaring through the air, their bodies broken as they hit the ground hard. "Come on!" Revell shouted to Kaneko and Miltelt as she raced toward the alley where her first attack struck. "Quickly, don't let them escape!" a shout came from one of the rooftops. Revell, Kaneko, and a still grumbling Miltelt ran into the alley just as several magical attacks struck the ground where they had been standing. The explosion of magic hit their backs, but the attacks could not reach them. It was just the shockwave. The trio ran through the alley as several mages appeared on the roofs above them. Magic circles formed overhead. Revell recognized the type of magic from the circle and immediately made a snap decision. "They're using ice magic, Kaneko, Miltelt, hit them hard." "Don't tell me what to do," Miltelt shouted, though despite complaining about being ordered around, the fallen angel still sent a light spear hurtling at one of their enemies. It didn't pierce the person, who blocked it with another magic circle, but the attack served the purpose of disrupting their casting. Kaneko didn't say anything as she threw several more blasts of senjutsu chakra at one of the enemy mages. Her attack wasn't aimed at the person, who threw up a shield, but at the magic circle, which exploded when her senjutsu chakra disrupted the circle. The mage who had been readying their magic could only scream as the circle destabilized and exploded in their face, sending them flying off the roof into the ground with a heavy thud. Their group burst from the alley and onto the open road. Not a soul was in sight. It appeared they had been trapped in a large barrier that separated them from the human world. Revell wondered how far this barrier extended, but it wasn't like the size mattered. They wouldn't be able to escape from something like this unless they defeated the person who created it, and she had a feeling the one who made it was the leader of this group. "We need to find a place to hide and collect ourselves," Revell said. "I can sense where those mage douche nozzles are," Kaneko said. "Follow me. I'll find us a place to recover and plan our next move." Thanks to Kaneko's senjutsu, she was able to sense all the life around her, including the life force of the attacking mages. This allowed them to avoid the area with the heaviest amount of mages, though they were attacked twice. However, thanks to the combined efforts of her and Kaneko, they were able to quickly dispatch each mage before they could communicate their location to their fellow ambushers. Kaneko, Revell, and Miltelt soon found themselves hiding inside of a clothing store several blocks from where they were first ambushed. "Oh, man. If I knew this was gonna happen, I would have stayed home," Miltelt complained as she crouched on the ground. She looked like she was having a panic attack. "Pipe down, filthy crow," Kaneko grumbled. "Shut up, don't call me a crow." "We need to think of a plan to take these mages down," Revell said as she ignored the small byplay between her current companions. We can't take them on all at once. Even with our strength, attacking a group of mages in a frontal assault is suicide. So what should we do? Asked Kaneko. Revell placed a hand against her chin and thought hard about what they could do in this situation. Her phone rang, but she couldn't afford to pick it up. Right now she needed to think about how to get out of their predicament. She couldn't think of a plan right away, so instead, she changed her thinking from what they should do to what the mages who ambushed them would do now that their prey had escaped. If I were those mages, now that my target had escaped, I would split up my forces into groups of 4 and scour the area. I'd make sure each group could maintain a line of communication, and I wouldn't have them move too far from each other so the groups could converge once one of them found the target again. Then I would surround the target and capture them. Revell looked at her 2 companions. I believe I am their target. Mephisto-sama said the mage faction of the Chaos Brigade was looking for members of the House of Phoenix. Then maybe we should just give you to them, Miltelt said snidely. That would get them off our backs, ouch. Knit, birdbrain, Kaneko said after smacking the girl across the head. That's actually not a bad idea, Revell murmured. Huh? Kaneko looked at her friend like she'd lost her marbles. But Revell just smiled. I think I have an idea, Devil Ninja. The mages had spread out to search for Revell Phoenix on orders of their boss, but she seemed to have disappeared after breaking the entrapment. Their leader for this mission had them spread out in groups to search for the trio. He didn't let any group stray too far from the others, however, because he well knew of the prowess at least 2 of these girls possessed. Revell Phoenix and Kaneko Taju were well-known entities. While they were not as powerful as people like Naruto Uzumaki and Issei Hyodo, they had displayed enough strength for the magicians here to feel wary of them. If any of you catch sight of them, be sure to report it to me. Do not try to fight them on your own.
Yes, sir. Owen Magus was a magician from Northern Europe. He had joined the Chaos Brigade along with the other stray magicians when Mephistopheles, that blasted devil, kicked them out of the Magicians Association.
He was not what you would call a high-ranking member on the magician ladder, but he was the one in charge of this squadron who had been tasked with capturing Revell Phoenix. Owen did not know what his leader wanted with this devil. He also didn't care. All that mattered was completing this mission and showing these damn devils, angels, and fallen angels that their group meant business. We found her. Where? She's running down Choshi. I have a clear view of her. Everyone, head to Choshi and hem her in. Don't let her escape. They were all speaking to each other telepathically using magic to connect their minds. This allowed them to speak with each other far more easily than humans using a cell phone. Owen didn't remain on the roof and jumped into action with the others, creating a magic circle beneath him that allowed him to fly using wind magic. It did not take long to reach Choshi Street. It was one of the wider streets in this section of Kuo City. Spotting Revell was also easy since she was not trying to hide herself. Her fiery wings flapped as she flew low to the ground. Owen did not see her 2 companions, but he wasn't stupid enough to think they had just left her alone. Move in and capture her, but be wary of ambushes.
With his orders given, the other magicians flew down and began peppering her with magic attacks. Because Revell was a Phoenix, they used mostly water magic. Phoenix family members were known for their powers over wind and fire, so using either element against them was stupid, and lightning and earth didn't work well against them. Water magic was the Phoenix family's greatest weakness.
Revell proved how adept at flying she was as she soared through the magic attacks. She juked left, right, and barrel rolled through the air to avoid the barrage of water magic sent at her. The magic slammed into the ground and destroyed the road, however, she remained unharmed. Owen did not give her a chance to retaliate. He ordered his mages to keep firing and even added his own firepower to their group. But the girl merely turned down an alley and disappeared. They followed, of course, but it was much harder to attack while she was traveling down that narrow alley. Someone get ahead of her and attack from the other side. 2 of his men raced ahead and stopped near the exit. They raised their hands, called upon their magic, and prepared a magic circle to attack Revell once she came into view. Revell must have seen it coming. A wild cylinder of fire spewed from the alley and slammed into the 2 magicians, engulfing their bodies. Owen grimaced when he saw the 2 fall from the sky and strike the ground hard enough to dent the pavement. Keep chasing her. Revell continued to lead their group on a merry chase, darting into alleys and ambushing her pursuers with a use of slide tactics and timing. Owen was in shock at how good this girl was at turning her situation around. It was like she had eyes in the back of her head, which allowed her to avoid being trapped in an ambush. At the same time, being outdone by a devil made the intense hatred he felt toward her kind surge inside of him like a rising tide. Once he caught this bitch, he was going to make her pay for making a fool of him. Several more people were taken down before they managed to surround her. Only 10 magicians remained of the original 20. That half of their forces were defeated rankled on him, damaged Owen's pride, but he consoled himself with the knowledge that it was only because they weren't trying to kill her. If they had been given permission to simply slaughter this little cunt, they wouldn't have suffered such losses. "You've given us a lot of trouble, bitch," Owen growled at the blonde girl as she stood with her back against a wall. "You don't even know how lucky you are. If we weren't ordered not to kill you, I would have blown that pretty head of yours off a long time ago. If you were ordered to kill me, I would have already escaped and you'd never know about it," Revell said snidely, her sneer making Owen see red. "Tie this precocious little shit up," he ordered. "Make sure you're rough with her. Just because we can't kill her doesn't mean we can't make her suffer." 3 of the 10 remaining magicians landed on the ground and wandered over to Revell, moving cautiously. Despite finding herself in trouble, however, Revell did not appear frightened or even worried. She stared at them with an intense look in her eyes as if she was waiting for something. Owen frowned as he tried to divine what she could be waiting for. It wasn't until he remembered something that the blood drained from his face. Where were her friends? Before he could realize that, in his efforts to chase Revell, he had forgotten about her friends, a loud scream erupted from behind him. He whirled around and saw 2 of his magicians go down when a white catgirl descended from the sky and drop-kicked them. Her attack was so powerful their bodies broke the sound barrier before they slammed into the ground with the force of a speeding truck. Seconds after they were defeated, 2 more were done in when spears of light pierced through their chests. Owen swore and tried to reinforce his men, but at that moment, Revell erupted like a ball of flames and soared forward. Wings extended from behind her and flapped. Then they curled around her body, turning her into a human devil torch. She slammed into one of his magicians, who screamed and flew backward, his body burnt and blackened. The wings unfurled a second later and she tossed 2 fireballs at another magician. One of them was blocked by a defensive barrier, but the other swerved around the barrier and struck the mage from behind. Owen saw red. Forget about taking her alive. Attack, attack. Since it looked like they weren't going to succeed anyway, he decided to kill her. He was sure their boss would forgive him. However, just as he gave this order, white hair and 2 cat ears appeared within his field of view. He only had 1 second to realize who that was before a foot slammed into his face. Owen felt the inexplicable pain of his jaw shattering. Then everything went black. Chapter 54. The factory. Rias did not know how many days she and Kiba spent in that room, lounging around and trying not to go stir crazy from the lack of anything to really do. Oh, it wasn't like they did absolutely nothing. Rias had created several contingencies in case their plans for this trip went pear-shaped. She and Kiba also played a lot of chess, but they stopped playing after the first 2 days. At present, Rias was lying on her bed, dressed in little more than a semi-translucent nightie that trailed down to her feet. Her heels and soles were pressed firmly into the bed as she reclined against the headboard. She was reading a book that she had requested one of the Carmilla servants to get for her, a book detailing the history of the Carmilla clan. Rias was looking for information that might help her get an edge over these vampires. "Rias, you in there?" Kiba asked as he knocked on the door to her room. "Yes, I am in here. You can come in," Rias said. She slipped a coat over her nightgown as the door opened and Kiba walked in. He closed the door behind him and made his way over to a chair next to a small table. "Is something the matter, Kiba?" asked Rias. "Isn't it obvious?" asked Kiba, frowning as he crossed his arms. "We have been here for 3 days, but we haven't been summoned even once." "Azazel has been summoned a lot," Rias pointed out with a smile. "You know what I mean," Kiba said with a sigh. "I do." Rias's teasing smile turned into a frown of uncertainty. "They have not yet honored my request to set up a meeting with the Vladi clan, nor have they even bothered to meet with me. It's incredibly rude of them. Makes me wonder if I should have even bothered coming here. I have a bad feeling about all this," Kiba added. "A feeling? What kind of feeling?" "Just, I feel like something bad is going to happen. You know I can't do much because of a feeling, right?" "I know. We'll just have to play everything by ear. Let's keep our eyes out for anything suspicious." Kiba nodded decisively once. At that moment, a knock came at the door seconds before it opened to reveal a young vampire woman with pale skin and red eyes, dressed in the traditional black and white uniform as a maid. She bowed to the pair. Miss Rias Gremory, Lady Carmilla has managed to speak with Count Vladi, who has agreed to have a meeting with you, she said without preamble. Please follow me. A car is waiting to take you to his estate. Very well. Please let me get dressed first, of course. Kiba? I'll be waiting in my room, Kiba said. As Kiba and the maid left, Rias slipped out of her overcoat and nightgown, then grabbed her outfit. She was not wearing the standard school uniform she so often dressed, but an extravagant red gown that clung to her figure. It was of a modest cut. She did not want to give anyone the impression that she was an easy woman, and so the cleavage-revealing dip was very small, revealing just a hint of her bosoms. Rias grabbed Kiba once she was dressed and the two of them followed the maid, though it was weird to her that she was leaving without even meeting Lady Carmilla even once. Was the vampire queen of the Carmilla faction so discriminatory toward other races that she couldn't be bothered to meet with her?
A car was waiting out front in the driveway. It was a typical limousine, which blended into the night so well a human would have missed it. Thanks Satan for enhanced night vision. The servant opened the door for her and Kiba as they climbed into the limousine and sat down, and then wandered over to the driver's side and said something to the driver. Rias could not hear what was being said, which made her frown.
Kiba? Yes? I think I also have a bad feeling about this? Kiba said nothing, but it was obvious from the expression on his face that he was wary. The rest of their ride was intense silence. It took about an hour to reach the Vladi clan's mansion. It was not located in the same small village as the Carmilla faction's mansion, possibly because the two clans were on opposite sides of this cold war of theirs. The village, with the Vladi clan's ancestral home, was much bigger than the Carmilla faction's, which Rias believed was because the male-dominant Teps faction had a larger population. Before the factions split, the clans were one. Rias had read that the Carmilla and Teps factions were born 100 years ago when the vampires argued between choosing a female true ancestor or a male true ancestor. They had not been able to decide, which led to the split and the rise of the two current factions. Most of the houses in this city were done in the traditional style found in Europe, made of wood and stone. They looked almost identical to the ones at the Carmilla faction's home. There were just more of them. Similarly, a thick fog covered most of the village, which served to keep prying human eyes from seeing this place. The mansion they were driven to was about the same size as Lady Carmilla's, but it looked older and more foreboding, like some ancient monster was living there. Rias knew such thoughts were ridiculous. But, still, she could not help but feel a little apprehensive now that the moment had come. I will wait here until you return, their driver told them. Thank you, Rias said. Don't bother, the vampire said in a snide voice. I am only doing this because it was ordered of me by Lady Carmilla. Rias's lips thinned into a tight line, but she did not bother saying anything else as she walked up the porch steps and reached the doors. They were fairly massive and extravagantly decorated with the crest of Clan Vladi on the front. A pair of vampires dressed as guards stood on either side. They wielded no weapons, but a vampire's entire body was a weapon, so that meant little. We are here to speak with Lord Vladi, said Rias in an authoritative tone. We have been expecting you, Rias Gremory, said one of the guards. I will escort you to meet his lordship. Follow me, and do not fall behind. The guards opened the door, and the one who'd been speaking walked inside. Kiba and Rias followed him. The entrance hall they first walked into was massive, featured numerous columns lining the walls, and several side halls that led deeper into the mansion. They walked through one of those side halls. Dark red carpet seemed to glisten like blood in the light projected off the candelabras that were affixed to the walls every few meters. Rias shook her head and tried to ignore the feeling in her gut that something was wrong. They stopped before a door. His lordship is just in here, said the guard. He glared at them. Mind your manners. What a pleasant fellow, Kiba said in a cheerful voice as the guard left. Ignore him, Rias said. Don't you find it odd that the guard didn't knock on the door to announce our presence? Kiba nodded slowly. So it wasn't just me then. I also found that unusual. Another thing that bothers me is that I haven't seen a single servant since we entered this mansion, Rias added. Vampires are vain and have dozens if not hundreds of servants to do everything for them. That not a single one has been seen at all since we got here is highly unusual. In other words, we should be on our guard, Kiba said, placing a hand on the hilt of a sword he created and sheathed at his waist. Yes. Let's be on our guard. Rias steadied herself by taking a deep breath. Her heart was hammering in her chest, but she recalled the reason she had come all this way. Gasper. Her servant was currently suffering because of what was happening here, and he wanted to do something about it, but she could not in good conscience allow her beloved servant to come to harm. That was why she was here. To ensure his safety while he was in vampire territory. She knocked once. Who is it? A voice said from beyond the door. They sounded oddly familiar. Lady Rias Gremory of the House of Gremory has come to speak with you, Lord Vladdy, Rias said in a clear voice.
Come in. Rias opened the door and entered with Kiba at her back, now suspecting more than ever that something was wrong. The door slammed shut behind them of its own volition. She could barely see anything of her surroundings. A darkness so thick not even her devil eyes could penetrate it. No, it wasn't a natural darkness. This darkness was infused with a thick and powerful magic that caused her scalp to prickle. Welcome, Rias Gremory. We have been expecting you.
The darkness suddenly receded, and Rias felt a chill run down her spine when she saw 3 people on the other side of the room. One of them was Rizavam Lucifer. He looked the same as always. By his side was a young girl who could have passed off as Ophus's sister, the sole difference being that she wore her hair in a ponytail while Ophus wore hers down. She knew this person was the vessel that now held Ophus's power, a being created by the Chaos Brigade. However, it was the person sitting on the throne that caught Rias's attention and held it. Spiky blonde hair that seemed dark and ominous somehow, jagged and sharp, but oh so familiar. 3 whisker marks on either side of his face. Crimson eyes surrounded by black instead of white. The person sitting on the chair, one leg propped on the other, was none other than Naruto Uzumaki, or rather, it was Naruto's evil half, the one he had taken to calling Yami. He sat there with a smug grin on his face that looked off wrong somehow. Yami, Rias sucked in a deep breath, but she tried to still her hammering heart. What are you doing here? Where is Lord Vladdy? Answer me. Lord Vladdy is currently recuperating at Castle Teps. He has had a most trying time these past few years since his son left. Don't worry. You will get to meet him soon enough, when I take you to the dungeon he is holed up in, Yami said with a sneer. His meaning was clear. He wanted to take her prisoner. Like I would let that happen, Kiba shouted as he knelt and slammed his hands into the ground. Sword birth activated and caused hundreds of blades to appear, though they quickly took the shape of dragon knights. They were large beings composed of hundreds of blades and shaped like bipedal knights in dragon-esque armor. Known as the Glory Dragtrooper, this subspecies balance breaker allowed him to create an army of holy sword-wielding dragon knights that could imitate the speed or technique of the user. From what Rias understood, Kiba was still in the process of perfecting this technique, but it was still one of his strongest moves. At the same time, Kiba summoned Graham, a powerful demon sword known as the Demonic Emperor Sword. It was something he had been given after the incident with the hero faction was resolved. As a dragon-slaying sword with incredible destructive power, it was a weapon that was like a more powerful combination of Ascalon and Durandal. While Kiba summoned his army and demon sword, Rias exploded with the powers of destruction, not hesitating to release everything she had in a single powerful attack. She knew better than anyone what kind of power these people wielded. One of them was the son of the former Lucifer, a Satan-class devil on par with her brother, another contained the power of the Ouroboros dragon, and the last was Naruto's dark half and currently contained most of her boyfriend's power. Holding back was not an option. The beam of destruction that she unleashed carved a path through the floor. It would have struck Yami, sitting smugly on his throne with a shit-eating grin that was so familiar it hurt. Before it could even make it, however, Lilith stepped in front of the attack and raised her hand, stopping the beam in its tracks. She didn't move back even a centimeter. Clenching her hand into a fist, she destroyed Rias's technique like it was nothing. Rias had never felt so weak. At that moment, the Glory Drag Troopers rushed forward to swarm Lilith, but they didn't get far before she unleashed a powerful explosion of energy that wiped them out in a split second. It was like Rias had blinked and they were just gone. Kiba, get back! Rias shouted. Kiba had been racing toward the group with Graham drawn. Her warning came too late. He swung the weapon at Lilith, who raised her hand and caught his blade on her palm like it was nothing. His arms trembled. But hers did not shake in the slightest. This was the power of the Ouroboros dragon. A power no living creature save Great Red could possibly possess. "Give him some pain, will you, Lilith?" requested Rizavam. "Yes," Lilith said. Before Rias could even scream out a warning again, Lilith blasted Kiba with what seemed like nothing more than straight-up magical power. There was no magic circle. It was like she had merely released her power and directed it to attack Kiba, who screamed in pain as he was sent flying backward. He slammed into the floor and rolled. "Kiba!" Rias ran over and knelt beside him to discover that he was passed out cold. He wasn't dead, however. His chest rose and fell with each breath, but he was injured. She looked up to glare at Lilith, Rizavam, and Yami. "Such a harsh look," Yami said with a dark chuckle that sent shivers down her spine. "Do not worry. I do not plan on killing you two yet." His expression darkened. "I want Naruto here when I kill you. I'm going to make him fall into despair, and then when he's at his weakest, I am going to take everything that was his." Lilith. "Yes." Lilith extended her hand toward Rias, dark mist pouring from her palm and engulfing Rias, who found herself struggling to stay awake. She tried to use her powers of destruction. She was even mildly successful at destroying the mist. But Lilith's power far exceeded her own. As she felt her consciousness slipping away, a single thought echoed through her mind. "Naruto, don't come here, devil ninja." Naruto arrived at the aquarium to discover that Revel, Kaneko, and the rest of their class were not present. He asked the lady at the customer service kiosk up front, but she didn't know where they went. Her shift had started after their group left. While Naruto didn't panic completely, he was unable to withhold a sigh of lament. Finding them would be much harder if he didn't know where they had gone. "Naruto, I am sensing magical fluctuations in that direction. It looks like someone has put up a barrier." "Or not. I guess we're going that way then." Naruto followed Kurama's directions and discovered the magical barrier easily enough. It was a barrier that separated a group of people from this world and placed them in another dimension, similar to the dimensions used in raiding games. If Naruto used his ability to sense magic, he could see the vague outline of the barrier and the magic circles involved in its construction. "It looks like they used a lot of different types of magic in its construction," Naruto mumbled as he placed a hand against the barrier. To the outside observer, it would have looked like he was touching thin air while muttering to himself, and indeed, many people were giving him odd looks. Naruto did his absolute best to ignore the gawking people in the crowd. He didn't care if these randos saw him as a fool. They were just regular people who he would probably never meet again, though he did feel some odd eyes on him at one point, yet when he looked for the source, they disappeared. "Naruto," a voice suddenly said. Almost screaming, Naruto turned to find Ophis standing right beside him, wearing the body of a slender adult woman. This was her standard look these days. At present, she was dressed in a black gown that had a large V-shaped cutout in the middle of her chest. It traveled over her breasts, showing some of her inner boob, and continued down until it stopped just below her navel. Naruto could see her cute little belly button. "Ophis, what are you doing here?" he asked. "I sensed magical fluctuations, so I came to see what was going on." Ophis nodded at the barrier. "Isn't that why you came here?" Naruto shook his head. "Revel and Kaneko are behind this barrier. I was just about to break it and rescue them." "Ah, in that case, we should hurry, though it seems they are fine." Naruto didn't know what this woman was talking about, but he guessed she could perhaps see beyond the barrier. That was probably it. Even with most her powers taken, Ophis was still an exceptionally powerful dragon god, and he didn't know what kind of powers she possessed. He put that out of his mind and focused on the barrier. Placing a hand on the barrier, he began weaving several magic circles of his own creation over them, causing the magic circles in this particular section to disintegrate and let them through. "I hate having to use magic like this," Naruto muttered as he stepped into the barrier. "It's so difficult." "Rosweiss would be devastated to hear you say that," Ophis said. "Rosweiss is a certified magical genius, while I'm just a hack," Naruto rebutted. "I don't have her insane talent for magic. Besides, it's not like I am not willing to learn from her. I'll need to know this stuff anyway for when I go up against magicians and other creatures who use magic. I just hate it. Too much thinking involved." Once they were inside the barrier, Naruto found himself standing in an empty street that looked exactly like the one he'd just left. He looked behind him and saw that there was nothing but white mist, the edge of the barrier. The sky above was a swirling vortex of magical energy. Now that he was inside of the barrier, it was much easier to sense Revel and Kaneko. They were with someone else who felt familiar. Naruto and Office followed their unique signatures and eventually found Revel, Kaneko, and Miltelt standing in front of a magician who was tied up and looking irritated as the three of them argued. "I saw we just kill him. We can't, we need to know why he attacked us." "Outvoted." "What do you mean outvoted? He's not willing to talk. Even torture hasn't gotten him to open up. We should just get rid of him and be done with it." There are other ways of making people talk that doesn't involve torture. Everyone has a weakness. If we can just find his, we can force him to tell us whatever we want. Good luck finding my weakness, it's never gonna happen. You be quiet. Put a cock in it, don't you mean sock?
Miltelt wanted to just kill the magician and get back to the school trip, but Revel and Kaneko were of the idea that they needed to figure out what this person was after. Naruto was with Revel and Kaneko on this one. Killing someone who attacked you without learning why they attacked was a recipe for disaster, especially if that person was part of a large organization, and given what he'd heard a few minutes prior to coming here.
"Kaneko! Revel!" Naruto shouted as he strode forward. "Eek!" Miltelt squeaked and hid behind the other two when she saw him, but Naruto didn't feel like screwing with her right now. "Naruto-sama." Naruto. Unlike their fallen angel companion, Revel and Kaneko actually seemed happy to see him. Their faces broke out in smiles as Naruto pulled them into a hug, his arms wrapping around their bodies, bringing them flush against him. He took in the scent of their hair, the feel of their figures, and the warmth of their skin, basking in the relief he felt at knowing they were safe. "I'm glad you two are okay," Naruto said at last. "HMPH. Why wouldn't we be okay? These magicians were wimps," Kaneko said. The magician they had tied up and bound glared at her with intense hatred at being called a wimp, or maybe he was angry that his comrades had been insulted even after death. "Can you explain to me what happened?" Naruto asked. "Of course, Naruto-sama." Revel was the one who explained what happened, from how they were ambushed in the food court during their school trip, to how they had devised a plan to deal with the ambush. Naruto was impressed by how well crafted Revel's plan was. She had used herself as bait to lure the magicians out, and then had Kaneko and Miltelt attack them from behind while they were focused on her. It was a simple but effective plan that had obviously worked since all the magicians save one were dead. "The only problem we are having is we don't know what to do with this guy." Kaneko hiked a thumb at the magician. "He won't talk about who he is, why he attacked us, or what he was hoping to achieve. And I won't tell you anything, you fucking monsters," the man snarled, and then went limp when Kaneko drop-kicked him in the head. "See what I mean?" she said. "I do see what you mean." Naruto eyed the unconscious man for a moment, then looked back at Revel and Kaneko. "I am pretty sure they are after her because of those fake phoenix tears. You remember what Mephisto said when he gave us the sample of fake phoenix tears? He said there were stray magicians that were attempting to contact members of the House of Phoenix. These people are probably those stray magicians." "That is what I figured." Revel nodded several times, however, it still doesn't tell us much. Who are these people? Why do they want a member of the House of Phoenix if they can create fake phoenix tears? I want to know what they are after. "Don't worry, I'm sure we can think of something," Naruto said to reassure her. It was at this point that Office stepped forward. She walked over to the unconscious magician, knelt, and placed a hand on his head. Naruto, Revel, Kaneko, and Miltelt watched silently as the man jolted awake like he'd been shocked. What is, stay still," Office murmured as she kept her hand on his head. "I need to see what you know." "What are you?" Naruto, Revel, Kaneko, and Miltelt, who Naruto had all but forgotten about, remained silent as Office closed her eyes, tilted her head, and furrowed her brow. None of them knew what she was doing, but she was the Ouroboros dragon. She was likely using some kind of magic to read minds. That was what Naruto assumed. At length, the woman let go of the magician. He dropped to the ground like a sack of bricks as she stood up. "I just read this man's mind," she said, turning to them. "It seems they were planning to kidnap Revel Phoenix and Kaneko Tiju, then send a note to us stating that if we wanted them back, we needed to come to the underground station." She tilted her head. "They were inviting the Gremory peerage, the Sea-Tree peerage, and Irina Shido only. I was not invited." "It seems like I wasn't invited either," Miltelt said. "How rude." The underground station, Naruto murmured. That must be referring to the station connected to the underworld, Revel said. You've used it before. The station nearest here has a basement where a train leading to the underworld is located. Right. We used it during the summer holiday, Naruto said with a nod. Are you ignoring me? Miltelt shrieked. Yes, I am, Naruto said without a hint of sympathy. You bastard. Naruto ignored Miltelt as he thought about the information Office had revealed. What I'm wondering is why they chose the underground station of all places. Who knows? Who cares? Kaneko shrugged. What do you want to do about this? Naruto considered their options. Let's contact Rosweiss and the others, he said after a pause. I believe we should inform everyone about what we've discovered. We should also alert Sona and her peerage about the stray magicians. Since the plan was to invite them along as well, it means they are involved in all this. Good idea, Revel said. We should also clean up the bodies. Leave that to me. While Revel created a personal communication magic circle to get in contact with Sona Citri and her peerage, Kaneko began piling the bodies of the stray magicians together. Naruto wasn't quite sure how they would get rid of the bodies just yet. He only knew they couldn't remain here when the barrier fell apart. In the meantime, Naruto also used a personal communication magic circle to call up Rosweiss, Issei, Irina, and the others, letting them know they had a problem and that everyone should meet up at the Occult Research Club room. With luck, they would be able to figure out what to do about this situation. Devil Ninja. The matter regarding the stray magicians who attacked Kaneko, Revel, and Miltelt was not something that Naruto could deal with on his own. He was aware more than anyone of his own faults. Naruto didn't think he was stupid, but he lacked the intelligence and knowledge to deal with this issue by himself. It was late evening. The members of the Occult Research Club and the Student Council had gathered in the old school building. Both couches were filled to overflowing. There were so many people present. Asia, Akano, Kaneko, Gasper, Issei, Irina, Naruto, Revel, Rainier, Miltelt, Xenovia, and Rosweiss were just those on the Gremory side. On the other side was Sona Citri and the members of her peerage. Tsubaki, Momo, Rhea, Tomo, Tsubasa, Saji, Ruruko, and two newcomers who Naruto didn't know. The first one to catch his attention was a young man with a foreign appearance. His large physique would have intimidated most normal Japanese citizens. Never mind the sensation Naruto felt when looking at him. Powerful body aside, there was a sense of predation about him. A lingering feeling like he might tear you apart with his bare hands. Gray hair and long bangs covered his handsome face. He might have been a match for Cyborg with his proportions. Next to him stood a cute girl who was positively tiny by comparison, skin a pale white that seemed almost ghost-like, dark purple hair descending down her back in a long braid, and sleepy golden eyes that were half-lidded. A long bow with a purple skull was used to tie her braid. 3 black markings ran up her outer thighs with gold lining the interior. While she seemed like a cute girl who might fall asleep at any second, the scent of death lingered around her. She was no ordinary child. Before we begin, I believe I should introduce my newest servants. Sona gestured toward the two. This is Lu Garo, my rook. He is a half-werewolf hybrid who was the result of a union between a werewolf and a famous magician. The other one is Benia. She is my knight. She is half-human and half-Grim Reaper. Her father is Hades. Whoa, 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 slow down. Issei suddenly shouted as he pointed a shaking finger at the girl. You mean to tell me this cute little girl is the daughter of the Hades? The man who controls the underworld and sent his Grim Reapers after us when we were rescuing Ophis? The same guy we learned about in Greek mythology classes? That Hades? The very same, Sona said with a nod, not denying it. But nobody could hardly blame Issei for his hesitance. After all, it was thanks to the Grim Reapers sent by Hades that he was killed during the mission to rescue Ophis. He might have been revived. And he might even be stronger now than he was before, but one doesn't get over the trauma of dying so easily. Please don't worry. Benia stepped forward and placed a hand on her chest, her expression passionate. I have no desire to ever be my father's servant. I do not even like my father. If anything, I am even more devoted to you, Issei Hyodo. What? Issei looked like he'd been socked in the face, such was his surprise. I am a huge Opie Dragon fan. Here, look at this. Benia turned around, finally showing everyone the back of her cape. Yes, it was indeed a cape that she wore. Not only that, but the cape had an embroidery of the Opie dragon on the back. It was one of Issei decked out in full red dragon scale mail, standing in a triumphant pose, hand thrust out as if to sink his finger into someone's nipples. Everyone was so stunned they could say nothing, except for Sona, who merely pressed a hand to her face and sighed. Naruto was the one who recovered first. He'd seen many weird things in his life. A former Grim Reaper who was a big fan of the Opie dragon was not the most unusual thing he'd ever seen, weird as that might have seemed. "So, you are a fan of Issei's?" asked Naruto from where he sat with Kaneko on his lap and Revel hugging him. She'd been like that ever since the attempted kidnapping. Some people might have assumed she was scared, but he knew she was merely using it as an excuse to hug him. "I am a big fan," Benya confirmed. Then she became bashful. "In fact, I was hoping to ask for your autograph. Can you please give it to me?" Speaking that last bit in a single breath, Benya summoned an autograph board and a permanent marker, which she proceeded to thrust into Issei's confused hands. Nobody spoke for the longest time. It was like everyone was waiting on bated breath for what Issei would do as he looked from the board to Benya, then back to the board. He seemed confused, rightly so. It wasn't every day you discovered you had a fan amongst the Grim Reapers. The moments passed. Issei continued to stare at the autograph board in his hand, and then he smiled. "Of course. Anything for a fan. Really? Yay." Issei signed the autograph board, gave it back, and Benya hugged it to her chest like it was the greatest treasure of her life. Everyone seemed to have a sigh of relief as the odd tension that had been mounting suddenly drained from the room. It was as if all that suspense was water filling up a sieve, but now several cracks had appeared and the water was slowly leaking out. "Now that my newest servants have been introduced, I believe we should get this meeting underway." "Tsubaki," Sona said, hands clasped on her lap as she sat with her back straight against the couch. She and her peerage were on the opposite side from Rias's. They looked like competing teams in a tournament, enemies or maybe frenemies, but that was far from the truth. Shinra Tsubaki stood behind the couch, hands clasped before her, posture proper. Black hair fanned out behind her head as she looked at them all with her intense gaze. "We are rather fortunate they chose to attack in the manner they did. Kuo City did not suffer any damage from the attack and no innocents were harmed. Azazel-sensei left a device with us that can alter the memories of people in case of emergencies, but we would rather not use it if we can help it." Everyone nodded, except Rainier and Miltelt, Naruto noticed. Most of the people here did not much care for altering the memories of humans if they didn't have to. Only those two held no such qualms. The device used to alter memories was something created by the fallen angels, so perhaps they simply didn't see it as a problem. "Several of our people are currently searching to see if any other stray magicians might be hiding in the city. Fortunately, we at least know where their hideout is thanks to Ophis, though I would have liked it if she could have left his mind intact. It would have been nice if I could have interrogated him myself," Sona said. Ophis had not been gentle when she was reading the stray magician's mind. Naruto didn't know what sort of magic she had done to probe his mind, but it had left him utterly brain-dead. The man was now a vegetable. "At least we were able to figure out where their hideout is," Kaneko said with a shrug. "We can just interrogate whoever we find there." "I guess that is true." Sona crossed her arms and sighed. "I hope we will be able to learn how they managed to infiltrate the city. This entire region is under the jurisdiction of the Three Factions Alliance. Many people from all three powers have made this city their home besides us, and there is a powerful barrier covering the entire town with the school as its focal point." Naruto knew about the barrier since he was now part of the nobility, a high-class devil, but he didn't know the specifics. He had no idea how it worked. It wasn't like he cared how it worked either. Come to think of it, didn't Konoha have a barrier similar to this one? "Can you think of any methods someone might have to break through the barrier?" asked Revel. Sona nodded and continued talking. "There are a couple methods someone can use to break through the barrier. The first is to enter using force. It is perfectly possible that someone with enough power can simply break through, but doing so would immediately give them away, so we can rule that possibility out. The second method is where a person who lives in this town or one of the staff leaves the barrier, gets captured, and has their minds and bodies taken over before they re-enter. We've been looking into this, but so far we haven't uncovered any evidence to suggest someone was possessed. There is one other method of entering the barrier, but... Everyone grew silent, pensive. Naruto crossed his arms and tried to think of the implications her words invoked. Of course, there was only one possible explanation to what she was saying. "You think there is a traitor among us," he said. "I think the possibility is highly likely," Sona confirmed, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose. "It is very possible. We certainly can't rule it out." Before she could continue speaking, music began blasting out, echoing around the entire occult research club room. Everyone froze as a heavy guitar riff echoed around them. I was caught in the middle of a railroad track. I looked round. And I knew there was no turning back. My mind raced. And I thought, what could I do? And I knew there was no help from you. Sound of the drums beating in my heart, the thunder of guns. Tore me apart. You've been thunderstruck as one. Each person turned to the source of the song, which Naruto vaguely recognized as English, though he didn't know the band. Roswise was beet red, face flushed, steam rising from her head. He didn't think he'd ever seen the woman look so embarrassed before. That was saying a lot since he had seen this woman at her worst. Excuse me for a moment," Roswise muttered as she fished out her phone and answered the call. Hello. Granny? What's going on? Is everything alright?" Naruto felt like his brain might explode as he listened to the woman talk. That was a countryside dialect, wasn't it? It was. Roswise was speaking with the dialect of someone born and raised in the countryside. What was that called again? A Kansai dialect. Naruto still wasn't completely versed in Japanese culture, but he remembered hearing something about people who spoke like this. But gosh, it was awfully cute. Naruto hoped he could make her talk like that during sex at some point. And great. Now he was imagining her screaming his name and talking gibberish like a country girl in the throes of passion. Saying the Norse settlement is already lacking funds. But I sent my last paycheck to Ya just last week. Too many people needin' money? I guess Ya makes sense. I'll see what I can do. Fair Ya. It's no prob, Granny. What? Didi, don't be talking about my relationship right now. Ya trying to embarrass me? Naruto looked at the wide-eyed faces surrounding him and couldn't help but snigger. This was the first time he'd heard Roswise talk like this, so it was definitely a first for everyone else. He wondered what other surprises this woman had in store for them. What? Issei also looked like his brain was going to fry. How could this be? The cool beauty, the 100-yen maniac who seems to fit in so well with the city, has an accent. And wait. What's this about sending someone money? Naruto was the one who answered him. You know how the Norse gods have been displaced because of the Chaos Brigade? Well, in order to help them settle in, Roswise has been sending them her paychecks. Almost all of her money goes to them. Well, to her grandmother at any rate. What, did you think she shopped at 100-yen stores just because she likes them? It's true this has become something of a hobby for her, but it was brought about by necessity. Of course Naruto knew about his lover's personal problems, though he'd never told anyone else out of respect for her. Rias probably knew about it too. Roswise was her servant, after all. When Roswise started working as Rias Gremory's servant, she began earning a monthly salary of 1.6 million yen. That was about 2 times greater than the average monthly salary of a manager working for a large company. Rias always treated her servants well, and this much money was a pittance for her family. Roswise soon finished her call and turned to face everyone. She had mastered her embarrassed blush, but her tips of her ears were still red. My apologies, everyone. I didn't think Granny, my grandmother, would suddenly call me so suddenly. She coughed into her hand once. Anyway, since she was on the line, I asked her if there was a spell that could break through the barrier undetected. She's a powerful magic user. I actually learned all of my magic from her. And what did she say? Asked Saji. Come on, don't leave us hanging here. Right. Well, the barrier is not something that can be broken through without alerting the people who created it. To do that would require someone opening a gap within the barrier from the inside, and the only people who could do that are those on our side, Sona's side. It is possible for core members of our group to pass through the barrier without a problem. That means everyone from Rias's peerage, my own peerage, Irina-san, Ravel-san, and Azazel-sensei. We might be the only ones who could arrange such a large-scale force to enter the barrier like this. Are you saying there is a traitor among us? Like here in this very room? Asked a shocked Saji. Sona's expression was gentle if not a little bitter. I do not believe there is a traitor, But whoever is responsible is someone we can't afford to underestimate. I believe we should proceed with caution and investigate every possibility. We should also head over to the train station and confront the stray magicians who tried to kidnap Revel, Naruto said, placing a hand on the thigh of the girl in question. Revel jolted a little at the sudden touch, but he removed his hand a second later after patting her. His gesture was not meant to be sexual in any way. Agreed, Sona said with a nod. Can you get in contact with Lefei? As a magician herself, she might be able to offer us some useful insight. I already tried, Naruto muttered with a bitter smile. Office told me that Kuroka and Lefei are currently away on business. It seems Valley needed them for something. Valley called them. Issei looked shocked. What could he want with those two? Naruto shrugged. Kuroka and Lefei are a part of his team, you know. They are only living with us because one of them is my contracted mage and the other is helping Kaneko train. I guess we will have to do this without them, Sona said. Let's come up with a basic plan before we head to the train station. As the group began laying the groundwork for the upcoming confrontation, Naruto looked out the window and at the clear blue sky. It looked like he was going to have his work cut out for him. They already knew where the stray magicians were located thanks to Ophis, who had taken the knowledge from the head of the unfortunate stray magician who was now a vegetable. Ophis had not been gentle with her mind attack. The stray magician was now resting in a hospital and would likely remain there for the rest of his life, though Naruto found it hard to sympathize with the man. Anyone who would even dare to try and kidnap his Revel was an enemy. He'd show them no mercy. The location where the stray magicians were located was the train station. They arrived not long after their initial meeting, stepping into the train station and glancing around. Something about being in a train station when there was no life to be found was disconcerting. Even Naruto did not like the look of this place. Abandoned. Foreboding. Darkness cast along the wall by the light of the moon and stars, creating shadows within shadows. Naruto took it all in, eyes searching, nose smelling. He did not extend his perceptions beyond his 5 basic senses. To use senjutsu now would have been foolish. Fortunately, there was someone here who could use it. Kaneko, do you sense anyone? Asked Naruto. Cocking her head to the side, Kaneko silently searched the area before shaking her head once. There's no one here. Naruto frowned. Strange. They are probably hiding, Sona affirmed with a stiff huff. Given what Revel told us, it is perfectly possible for them to create an alternate dimension much like the ones used in our raiding games. If that is the case, they can hide from our senses indefinitely, or until they choose to reveal himself. So you're saying that even if they are here, we might not be able to find them? Asked Saji. Precisely. That blows, Issei mumbled. Before we begin searching, I think we should decide on who among us will lead everyone, Sona said, stopping the whole group in their tracks. They stood inside the plaza, a spacious interior located just off the train tracks. Thick square columns raised the ceiling over their heads. An escalator several dozens meters to the right led up to a second floor filled with shops and cafes. If Naruto turned his head, he would have seen the tracks and boarding ramp, usually bustling with the vibrancy of life but currently deader than a grave. Do you think this is needed? Asked Akeno. Sona nodded. I do. Rias Gremory is currently gone, which means either myself or Naruto, another high-class devil, should be giving the orders. I believe that normally the one giving the orders would be me since I have spent far more time as a high-class devil than Naruto has, but he has far more experience with combat than I do. Therefore, I believe ceding orders to him is our safest bet for success. What say you? Akeno turned to study Naruto. As Rias Gremory's queen, she had more authority than he did within their peerage, even if his newfound authority within Devil Society exceeded hers. He met her gaze evenly. Do you want to take the position of leader? She asked. Not particularly, no, Naruto shook his head, then grinned fiercely. But I do think Sona is right. If nothing else, I have a lot of experience with battle. Before coming to this world, Naruto had been a shinobi, had fought in a vicious war that claimed thousands of lives, had faced off against a god, and had been through perils few could imagine. And he'd faced even more danger since coming here. If nothing else, Naruto was confident in his experience and strategies, unorthodox though they might have been. Then I'll accept this arrangement. Akeno nodded and stepped back. Looks like we'll be relying on you, Mr. Leader Sensei, Issei said, giving Naruto a thumbs up. Beside him, Asia smiled. Good luck. I know you can do this. Ah, thanks, sis. Heh, he called me sis. Are you ignoring me? Naruto ignored Issei's shout and Asia's warmly flushed cheeks to look at the others. There was Zenobia and Irina, standing by Asia's side. Gaspar stood close to Issei, whom he had formed a rapport with alongside Naruto and Kiba. Roswise stood behind Kaneko and Ravel. The two shortest members of his group were staring at him, one with expressive blue eyes and the other a bored, golden hue. He turned his gaze from those of Rias's peerage to Sona's. He surveyed the people there, taking their measure to see if they would follow him. Everyone met his eyes. Good. Okay, he breathed out, exhaling whatever pent-up worries he might have had. Roswise. You know the most about magic among us. Can you figure out how to open a gateway or portal to whatever realm these stray magicians are hiding in? That would largely depend on how they are hiding, Roswise confessed, worrying her lower lip. Given what we know so far, I do not think whatever spell they have woven to keep themselves hidden is something they can maintain on their own. It would require constantly feeding magic into a magic circle, which is a laborious and wasteful process. More than likely, they will have set up some kind of magic circle, or even multiple magic circles, around this station, that draw in magical energy to fuel their spell. Of course, they'll likely keep the portal closed when it's not being used to conserve energy, which means we won't be able to find them based on magical emissions. Everyone nodded at her words. Naruto ordered them to begin searching, having them split off into groups of 3. One to attack, one to defend, and one to flee so they could inform the others. Naruto traveled with Ravel and Kaneko. Ravel was in the most danger and therefore safest with him. Kaneko simply refused to leave her friend's side. They searched the entire train station from top to bottom, from the restrooms to the cafes to the boarding ramp itself. They found nothing. No matter where Naruto and the others looked, they could not find a single trace of a magic circle anywhere. With their search fruitless, the group reconvened in the lobby. No luck? Naruto asked the others. None, Sona said, and we were very thorough in our search. We couldn't find anything either, Issei admitted. I hate to say it, but perhaps we were wrong, Saji said, crossing his arms. Who's to say they are really here? Maybe they purposefully left tracks behind that we could follow, all to lure us into a false sense of superiority. I don't think that's it, Zenobia said with a slow shake of her head. There's no point in luring us here if they aren't going to attack. But maybe they're afraid of us. Irina pressed a single to her lip and thoughtfully pushed it. I mean, we have a pretty frightening lineup. That was hard to deny, what with Naruto, the Red Dragon Emperor, Swordbirth, several holy sword wielders, a Dampier with forbidden Balor view, and a Nekusho. No sane person would go up against a force like theirs. At the same time, Naruto did not believe that was it. What if we are looking at this the wrong way? He asked. We've been looking for circles that are being used to hide a barrier from view. But what if we should be looking for a single circle that acts like a portal connecting this train station to someplace further away? That, Roswise began before a thoughtful expression crossed her lovely face, is very possible. Sona furrowed her brow, pushed her glasses up her nose, and asked, in that case, what should we look for? Another magic circle? We have already looked everywhere for one and found nothing. It doesn't have to be a magic circle, Roswise said suddenly, eyes brightening. It can be an artifact. A gateway is just a portal connecting two distant locations separated by space-time. To create a gateway, you need something that has been infused with magic power and can symbolize a gate between two realms. In Shintoism, Torii often signify the gateways between the human realm and the realm of the gods, which is why Torii are present at every shrine. So we are looking for something that symbolizes a gateway. Ravel cupped her chin and thought deeply on the matter. Then her eyes lit up. If it's a gateway, wouldn't the boarding ramp serve that purpose well? While everyone else's eyes lit up at the words, Roswise shook her head, dispelling their hope before it could fully form. You are right that it could be used as a gateway, but it's already being used like that to begin with. There is a gateway to the underworld there. The magicians will not have messed with it because doing so would lead to us knowing where they are. Oh, Ravel murmured as Roswise explained her reasoning. It was sound, and the blonde Phoenix girl could not dispute it. Her shoulders still slumped. Let's split up again, Naruto suggested, but this time look for something that could symbolize a gate. They traveled around once more, splitting off into their groups and looking for a gate. Everyone found something they believed could be a gate. An archway. A door. The entrance to a shop or cafe. Rosweiss checked each one and shook her head. None of them had any magic emanating from them. Naruto pondered the matter of the gate as he studied a wall with a mosaic on it. There was a fountain embedded halfway into the wall. The water was currently turned off, but he knew that when it was on, the water would shoot from a spout at the top, splash against the mosaics designed to look like rain clouds, and fall down in a precipitous downpour. Not a gate, he already knew it wasn't. Standing off to one side of the gate was a lion. Nothing special about it. Just a single lion situated atop a pedestal, sitting on its haunches as it looked at the entire train station as though it were a guardian beast. He took one glance at it, then went back to studying the fountain, wondering what exactly would symbolize a gate. "Naruto, have you found anything?" asked Rosweiss, coming up to him. He shook his head. "Not a thing." Rosweiss frowned at him, opened her mouth like she was going to say something, and then closed it again. Naruto was confused for a moment. He would have asked, but he was given no time as the woman walked past him and up to the lion statue. This is it," Rosweiss exclaimed. "What, you mean the statue?" Naruto scrunched up his nose in confusion, but then it cleared as the implications hit him. "You mean that's the gate?" "Yes," Rosweiss said, still excited by her discovery. "I didn't think about it before, but lion statues are often placed near the doors for symbolic purposes. In China, they act as guardians, defending homes against accidents and theft. For Buddhists, lion statues are said to bring peace and prosperity, while in Italy, they symbolize power and prestige. In Quebec, homeowners traditionally place 1 or 2 lions in front of their house once their mortgage is paid off. "Their mortgage?" Naruto asked, a single eyebrow raised. Never mind that." An embarrassed Rosweiss waved him off. "My point is, lions remain a symbol of honor, respect, and power, and they are often used symbolically to stand before entrances for one purpose or another. This is true no matter what country you live in." Naruto watched as Rosweiss stood before the lion statue and began casting a number of spells on it. Numerous magic circles of varying complexity were used to scan the statue. He let her do what she wanted. Naruto was no great magician, no powerful spellcaster. He knew enough about magic thanks to Rosweiss and the others that he could use it reasonably well, but he didn't understand the intricacies behind it. 2 seconds passed. 5, 10. After Naruto counted another 30 seconds in his head, Rosweiss finally turned to face him. He knew the answer to his question before he asked it, for her eyes gleamed victoriously, but he asked her anyway. "Is that it? Is it the gateway?" "It is." "This is the gateway." "It is, rather complex." "I'll need some time to analyze it, but give me a moment and I believe I can crack the magic keeping it shut," Rosweiss said, confirming his suspicions and making him sigh in relief. That was one step down. Now it was time for step 2. Breaking and entering. Rosweiss was able to open the gateway. Naruto could only gaze in awe as she cast several spells on the lion, which revealed a slew of magic circles that none of them had been able to see or sense, and then one by one created overlapping magic circles that activated the gateway. The gateway itself looked like a portal, a swirling black nebula, a black hole beyond which nothing could exist. Naruto had seen plenty of portals before. He understood that each one was different depending on the magic used. However, he'd never seen a portal quite like this one. "That's done." Rosweiss clapped her hands. "This will take us to wherever the stray magicians are." "It could also be a trap," Sona said. "Even if it is a trap, I don't think we have any choice but to press forward," Issei said. "I would like to go," Revel added in a quiet voice. "I want to know why these stray magicians came after me. I want to know what they want with me." Naruto reached out and took Revel's trembling fist into his hand. She jolted as if awakening from a dream, looked at him, into his sky-blue eyes, and then her fist relaxed and she grasped his hand. The gratitude in her eyes was more than enough for him. "I understand how you feel," Sona said with a sigh, "and I'm not saying we shouldn't go. We came all this way, after all. We can't go back. I am merely saying we should exercise caution." That went without saying, and no one disagreed with her. Naruto quickly decided on their marching order. He was in the front while Issei took rearguard. They were the strongest 2 people present, which meant it would be best if they each guarded the two weakest points in their lineup. Ravel was in the center, surrounded by Kaneko, Rosweiss, Akano, and Gasper. They would act as her guards in case trouble occurred. Sona's peerage surrounded them in turn as a first line of defense, while Sona herself was taking point with Naruto. They stepped through the portal like this and found themselves standing in an empty space. White. 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 No matter where any of them looked, the entire space was nothing but an expanse of white. Naruto could vaguely tell from his own perceptions that this space was shaped like a rectangle, but he could neither see the hard edges that defined this room nor spot any shadows to help give him a sense of depth. "What is this place?" asked Issei. "This place is creepy as fuck," Kaneko added. "I don't know why, but something about this space feels wrong," muttered Irina as she and Xenovia closed in around Asia as if to protect her from attack. As Naruto wondered what sort of space they had stepped into, a voice suddenly spoke out. "I see you broke through my barrier. No, you entered through the gate. There must be a skilled magic user among you. Could it be that Valkyrie I've heard so much about? What was her name again?" Everyone else leapt at the sound of the voice, but Naruto narrowed his eyes, spun around, and threw a wind-infused kunai at where the voice came from. He hit nothing but air. There was nothing for him to hit, nothing except a shadow dancing on the ground. A shadow that had not been present just seconds ago. So quick to violence, the voice continued as the shadow morphed. It rose from the ground, turned into an amorphous blob, then took on a more human shape. The shadows dispersed moments later to reveal a man dressed in silver robes. His outfit looked expensive, and he was quite tall, though those were the only features to be made out. A hood drawn over his face cast the man's appearance into shadow. "Are you the stray magician in charge here?" asked Sona, stepping forward. Now that there was someone to speak with, to negotiate with, she had taken center stage. "I am, Sona Citri of the illustrious House of Citri." The man nodded and spread his arms in an encompassing gesture. "I suppose I should welcome you all to my factory. You did well to make it here. I'm curious to know how you managed to activate my portal without knowing the proper spells to activate it. I made this space within the dimensional gap, using a modified version of the technique used by you devils in your raiding games. I trust I don't need to tell you why what you did should be impossible. You don't, but you should also know that it is possible to counter any spell so long as you understand the formula," Rosweiss said. "So I was right. The one who was able to open the portal was you. It's quite the honor to meet the granddaughter of the infamous Gondal." The young man spoke with mirth clear in his voice. "Now, while I would love to welcome you all good and proper, I am afraid we must first deal with some pesky issues. Let us call them matters of revenge. You people killed the magicians I sent to kidnap the young Phoenix girl. As the leader of these people, I'm afraid I cannot let that slide." As he spoke, more shadows appeared around them. 1, 5, 10, 20, 40, 80. Naruto eyed the shadows warily as they transformed into people. All of them were dressed in robes, though none so vibrant and beautiful as the one adorning their leader. These robes were dark, black with purple lining the hems. Each of them had their hoods pulled up as well. This cast their faces in shadows like their leader, making it impossible to determine their facial features. "So you plan to kill us?" asked Sona, glaring at the man. The stray magician shrugged. "Had you not killed my people when they attempted to bring the Phoenix girl here, we might have considered sparing you, but probably not. This is war, after all. You of the three factions alliance are our greatest enemies. Tell me, would you spare your enemies if you had them within your grasp?" It was a logical argument that made sense from the standpoint of a soldier, but Sona and the people with her were not soldiers. Naruto aside, everyone present was just a high school student, devil or not, and they were not inured to violence like he was. Each of them flinched by the words as if repulsed by the idea. The young magician chuckled. "Well, you are still young. Perhaps the idea of killing is distasteful to you. Regardless, you all have to die. So sorry, but all of you except the Phoenix child need to just disappear." At that exact moment, nearly 100 magic circles filled the space around them. Their group closed ranks. Sharp intakes of breath echoed from several of their members as they stared at the magic circles like animals trapped in a cage. There were so many stray magicians it was impossible to count their numbers. "Well, this sucks," Saji mumbled. "You're telling me," grumbled Issei. "What should we do?" asked Gasper. Naruto thought quick. Mind working far faster than it had in quite a while. He came up with an idea in short order. Sona. Have your peerage create a barrier. They only need to block the first barrage. Okay. You heard the man, Sona barked as she stepped forward, hands raised. The others in her peerage quickly followed suit, including her two newest members. They raised their hands and created a bright barrier that surrounded their entire group. It rippled with a golden intensity, semi-translucent, like a thin layer of film was covering them. 100 attacks were launched mere seconds after their barrier was formed. The stray magicians were using fire magic. Brilliant red flames flew at them, struck the barrier, and exploded against it, causing ripples to appear on the barrier's surface like disturbed water. Sona and the others grunted as the attack struck. Their arms shook as if they were pushing against a great weight. However, much to their enemies' surprise, the barrier held. Drop the barrier when I count to 3. Akeno and Revel. Once the barrier drops, launch your strongest attacks to soften them up. Got it, Issei said. Kaneko pounded her fists together. Time to kick some ass. Be careful, Naruto, Revel said. Everyone expressed their readiness, and then Naruto took a deep breath, settled his nerves, and counted to 3. Once he hit 3, the barrier dropped. In the next instant, Revel and Akeno launched their strongest attacks. Revel's attack came out in the form of a massive flaming phoenix. The firebird released a shrill cry as it flew forward and struck our enemies with impunity. Several magicians raised their hands and created their own barrier to deal with the attack, screaming as the phoenix exploded against the magic circle barrier and pushed them back. They survived. But it was by the skin of their teeth. Lightning traveled from Akeno's palm, pure white and filled with holy energy, the signature attack of Barakiel. Holy lightning. The bolt slammed into a barrier similar to the one that blocked Revel's attack. Unlike what happened with Revel, Akeno's lightning pierced right through the barrier and struck one of the magicians, whose body lit up like a fireworks display. His scream was overpowered by the sound of thunder. He spasmed as the lightning coursed over and through his body, cooking him on both the inside and the outside. When the lightning attack ended, the magician fell to the ground with a dull thud. We're going now, Naruto shouted. Revel, command the others, I leave you in charge of our strategy. Leave it to me. Revel looked determined as she narrowed her eyes and thought up an on-the-spot strategy for their current predicament. Gasper, stop as many of these people in their tracks as you can. Drink Aiza's blood if you need more power. Naruto, you can deal with the northern flank. Issei can deal with the south. The Sea Tree Peerage will deal with our enemies to the east. Tsubaki, they will probably launch another attack soon. Use Mirror Alice to reflect the attacks back at them, and then Sona can launch her own attack. Once she has, Benya, Saji, Lu Garo and the rest of your peerage can attack up close. Kaneko, Zenovia, and Irina. I would like you to deal with the last side with Akeno and Roswise providing support. Asia, you're on healing duty. Her words came out in sharp bursts. Everyone nodded and went on the attack. Naruto grinned as he raced forward, pulling several kunai from storage seals in his pouch and tossing them at the startled magicians. Of course, they had the good sense to put up a barrier. As the kunai clinked off the barrier, Naruto made a hand seal. Katsu. The paper seals he had wrapped around the kunai exploded, but not with fire. A black cloud of smoke expanded so fast that it covered the magicians within seconds. Their panicked cries echoed from within. I can't see. What is this? It's a smokescreen. Blow it away with wind magic. It only took a few seconds before the magicians regained their composure. Wind exploded from them, banishing the smoke, but this left them wide open to Naruto's attack, and he didn't hesitate to slam a Rasengan into one man's chest. A scream of pain ripped through the man. It didn't last long before he was sent sailing through the air, his chest cavity torn to shreds. Before the magicians had time to fully recover, Naruto raced past several of them, flicking his wrists like he was launching something from his sleeves. A moment later and two magicians were strung up like marionettes. Their bodies were wrapped in ninja wire. They screamed and struggled against the wire trapping them, but Naruto was not one to let them get away. They had used fire magic against him and his companions, so he decided to return the favor. A blazing fire so hot even Naruto was sweating trailed a scorching path down the ninja wire. This was a technique Naruto remembered Sasuke using during his battle against Orochimaru in the Forest of Death when they were participating in the Chunin exams. He could see why it was a favored technique amongst the Uchiha. The fire swept along the wire, struck the magicians, and engulfed them in flames so intense their bodies disappeared within the inferno. Naruto did not stick around and wait to see if they were alive or dead. He still had more enemies to fight. Devil Ninja, Mirror Alice. Tsubaki Shinra held out her hand and created a mirror before her. Mirror Alice was her sacred gear, a powerful artifact that allowed her to reflect any attack back at the caster. The powerful magic projectiles that had been launched at her struck the mirror, were absorbed into it, and reflected back at the magicians who cast them. They were hit hard. Screams escaped wide open mouths as they were struck by their own attacks. At that moment, Sona created a magic circle and launched her own attack, a massive serpent made of water that burst forth, whipping around its powerful tail and slamming it against several magicians who were too slow to react. Their bodies flew away like bullets fired from a gun. When they struck the ground, their bodies bounced, rolled, and went still. As the water serpent continued its rampage, Sona's other servants moved in. Among this group was Benya, Saji, and Lugaro. These three were clearly the strongest among her servants. Saji had already activated his balance breaker. His body was covered in Vitra's armor as he attacked the enemies like a maddened berserker. This happened when he was channeling Vitra's power. He slammed into one unfortunate man with a punch that sent him flying. The magician was fortunate to have survived, but he lay on the ground, moaning in pain. He wouldn't be getting up anytime soon. Beside him, Benya and Lugaro attacked with fists and scythe, cutting down or blasting away anyone that moved. Benya proved herself an able knight. She was like a dancer as she swung the scythe around her body in elegant arcs. The long scythe made from a curved black blade and featuring golden lines was swung so fast that all most people saw were afterimages. Each attack seemed to drain the life force from her opponents. Even a small cut was enough to make someone struck become faint. Lugaro had transformed, body covered in thick fur, face more like that of a wolf's than a human's. He still stood on two legs like any biped. The muscles in his legs rippled as he burst forward, extended his arm, and slammed into a magician with something resembling Kurabi's lariat. The stray magician tried to block the attack with a barrier, but the barrier shattered like it was made of glass. The stray magician was struck and sent to the ground. "Expand! My shield! Twinkle Aegis!" Yura shouted and the shield in her hands began glowing, the bright luminescence spreading from the shield and changing into a giant shield of light. So big was this shield that it took up nearly half the space they were in. Several magical attacks slammed into the shield, but there was not a scratch to be seen. The moment the shield dispersed, Meguri charged into the breach and began fighting alongside Benya, Saji, and Lugaro. Meguri swung her katana, an artificial sacred gear that blended light and darkness together. A single swing of her sword brought down two magicians. Over on the other side of the battlefield was Issei who, like Naruto, had become a one-man army. He had already entered his balance breaker. The scale mail covering his body gleamed red in the light as he systematically demolished every magician close by. A single punch sent a magician screaming as he hurtled away. A powerful rising kick slammed into the underside of one magician's jaw and sent him skyward, where he slammed into another magician just as she was getting ready to cast. Issei held out his hand and formed a small sphere of red energy. He clenched his hand, drew it back, and threw it forward, fist slamming into the energy ball. "Suck on this!" Dragon shot. The dragon shot flew forward and slammed into the pair, exploding with enough force to kick up incredibly fierce winds. Issei didn't watch to see what happened to them. They would live, but he was sure they'd need medical attention. While Issei and Naruto were basically one-man wrecking balls, the group consisting of Akeno, Kaneko, Irina, and Xenovia were fighting in a sprawling brawl of magic and melee combat. Akeno soared through the air, attacking everything with lightning. Each blast of white lightning shot from her hands, an incandescent arc of destruction energy. It struck a magician and fried their bodies, causing their cooked corpses to fall from the sky. Among the people present, Akeno's magical attacks were probably second only to Sona's. Of course, while Akeno had plenty of magic power, the breadth of her spells could not even compare to Rosweiss. The silver-haired Valkyrie created dozens of magic circles. Each one was different, each one launching a different attack. Fire, ice, lightning, wind, space. The various magical attacks soared through the battlefield, demolishing shields and blasting magicians left and right. They were like helpless sailors caught within a storm at sea. While Irina and Zenobia fought side by side, utilizing the teamwork that had made them such a powerful duo when they were both working for the church, Kaneko fought alone. She had already activated her Chiron mode as she waded into enemy lines. With her body larger and bustier than normal, she lashed out with senjutsu and her incredible strength, mixing melee combat with yokai magic. Several magicians tried to attack everyone while they were distracted, but Gasper provided the perfect backup, trapping people in time before they could deal any serious damage. The few injuries their side did sustain were healed by Asia. She had become a lot more proficient at healing her allies from a distance. The stray magicians they were fighting numbered somewhere in the hundreds, and yet in the span of maybe 10 minutes, all of the magicians they had fought were defeated. The man who had orchestrated Revel's failed kidnapping found himself surrounded on all sides. His members lay on the ground, groaning in pain or completely still. He wore a bitter look on his face. It made Naruto think of someone who'd swallowed something incomparably sour. Now that we have dealt with all that unpleasantness, perhaps you would be willing to fully answer our questions, Sona said, once more taking charge. It sounded like she was asking a question. Can I refuse? The magician asked. You cannot. Then go ahead and ask. Can't say you like my answers though. His words caused Sona to push her glasses up the bridge of her nose as she asked, for what reason did you try to kidnap Revel? There are a few reasons we tried to kidnap her. One of them was, let's call it curiosity. We have heard so much about you all, about the powerful young devils who have made a name for themselves. Of course, we've heard about Naruto Uzumaki and Issei Hyodo as well. You people are rather famous nowadays. Many of our younger recruits wanted to test themselves against you, and the people at the top didn't care if they threw their lives away, the young man said. It sounds like Yami is as callous as ever, Naruto muttered. Your dark half is a serious pain in the ass, Kaneko said, sounding snippy. Not that Naruto blamed her. What is the other reason? Asked Sona. This. The man snapped his fingers, and a section of the space on their left suddenly moved away, then sank into the ground. The room beyond looked like something taken from a sci-fi anime. Large capsules stood silent as monoliths, connected to a strange device. Each capsule was filled with liquid. A person floated inside each one, their legs curled into their chests, bodies inert. What is this? Asked Naruto in quiet shock. Grinning at them, the man said, do you know how phoenix tears are produced? A magic circle is prepared and a cup that has undergone a secret ritual is given to a pureblood member of the House of Phoenix, who stands in the circle and cries into the cup. The water inside the cup becomes phoenix tears. It is said that during the procedure, Phoenix members must empty their minds and not think about anything at all. If they feel emotional when they cry, the tears become that person's tears instead of Phoenix tears. As the man spoke, several people within their group looked startled. Revel had gone pale. All the blood had drained from her face, her legs were shaking, and she looked seconds from covering her ears. The man continued. This place is a factory that mass produces artificial Phoenix tears. We created numerous clones of high-class Phoenix members. They are the ones who produce Phoenix tears that we sell on the black market. No, Revel whispered, horrified as she brought a hand to her mouth. Tears gathered in her eyes. Since this factory was going to be abandoned, all the clones have ceased functioning, the man added almost as an afterthought. Revel was shaking by this point. She looked like the world had disappeared from underneath her. Naruto was torn between wanting to comfort her and wanting to tear this man limb from limb. In the end, he pulled Revel into a hug, holding her tightly as she turned away from the sight of the now dead clones. His shirt became damp with tears. Sona narrowed her eyes. So the Chaos Brigade has been sending Phoenix tears they produce here to the black market to gather funds. Quite repulsive if you ask me. Is the reason you people kept going after people from the House of Phoenix because you wanted to improve the potency of your product? Something like that. There is a limit to how potent our false tears are. They are not as powerful as normal Phoenix tears. We were hoping to kidnap a member of the House of Phoenix in order to gain the information we needed to make our own product better. I never imagined we'd find ourselves being defeated so thoroughly though, and by our own target no less. Naruto understood what was going on now. These magicians must have hit a roadblock in the production of their Phoenix tears. He mentioned something about potency, so more than likely, the false tears they created could not heal as well as the real deal. To correct this, they had decided to go after a member of the House of Phoenix and pry the information from them. Revel just so happened to be the one who was most easily attained. Oh, there is one more reason we attacked Revel. The young magician smiled. We were hoping you would help us test a new product our leader created recently. Before any of them could ask him what he meant, a magic circle appeared underneath his feet. The man smiled as he sank into the circle. They tried to stop him, launching attacks and casting spells, but none of their attacks hit. The man vanished and something else took his place. Multiple somethings. Dragons. That was the first word that came to Naruto's mind as he stared at the creatures appearing from within the magic circles. Their large bodies were held aloft on 4 legs. Muscles rippled with every movement. Pinions jutting from their backs. Long necks extending from their bodies. Their distinctly reptilian heads were filled with rows of sharp teeth. One of them opened their mouth and released an intense roar that rattled Naruto's very bones. Dragons had been summoned, nearly 50 of them. Fuck.